When your father sells you to save himself, you have two choices: break or become unbreakable. Tonight, I'm sharing a story about a woman who turned her darkest moment into absolute power. A tale of betrayal, blood, and the ruthless climb from collateral to queen. This is Elena Carter's story, and it will leave you breathless. If you're ready for a journey into the shadows where empires are built and loyalty is paid in blood, stay until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The price of survival. The house stank of failure. Elena Carter stood in the doorway of what used to be her childhood home, watching water stains spread across the ceiling like dark prophecies. The wallpaper her mother had chosen 15 years ago, delicate roses on cream, now hung in strips, revealing the rot beneath. Everything beautiful had a way of decaying in this place. She was 23 years old and had learned to measure her life in losses. First, her mother. Cancer had been efficient, clinical, taking her in 8 months flat. Then her younger brother Jake, who'd wrapped his car around an oak tree at 17, drunk on cheap vodka and cheaper friends. Her father had unraveled after that, finding comfort in poker games he couldn't win and promises he couldn't keep. Now there were men in her living room, not just any men. The kind who wore expensive suits to deliver threats, whose cologne couldn't quite mask the scent of violence that clung to them like a second skin. 4 of them spread throughout the cramped space like well-dressed tumors, making everything seem smaller, meaner, more desperate. "Mr. Carter," the one in the center said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "We've been patient, extraordinarily patient." Elena's father, Thomas Carter, knelt on the threadbare carpet where she'd once played as a child. His hands shook. At 52, he looked 70, hair gone gray and thin, face collapsed into itself like a building after the supports had been kicked out. His gambling debts had started small, 1,000 here, 2,000 there. Then the interest began to compound, and the bookies sold his debt to someone bigger, who sold it to someone bigger still. Now, he owed Victor Moretti $300,000. Victor Moretti didn't lend money as a favor. He lent it as a test to see who would break and how. "Please," her father wheezed, "just another month. I can get—" "You said that 3 months ago." The speaker stepped forward into a shaft of weak sunlight filtering through the dirty windows. He wasn't Victor Moretti. Elena knew that much. Victor didn't make house calls to collect from small-time gamblers. This was someone else. Someone whose eyes were too calm, too measuring, too comfortable with the mathematics of suffering. His name was Marcus, she'd learn later. Victor's right hand, the man who handled problems before they became problems. "I have a job lined up," Thomas stammered. "A real one. Construction. I just need time to—" "You're a 52-year-old man with a bad back and a drinking problem." Marcus's tone didn't change, didn't heat up or cool down. He might have been discussing the weather. "The only job you're qualified for is disappointing people. You've made a career of it." Elena watched from her position by the stairs, perfectly still. She'd learned years ago that stillness was a form of invisibility. Men like this noticed movement, noticed fear, noticed anything that might be useful. So she stood like a statue, breathing slowly, keeping her face neutral. But her mind was racing. 300,000. Her father didn't have $300. The house was mortgaged beyond redemption, his car repossessed last month, his credit cards maxed and canceled. There was nothing left to take. Except, "Mr. Moretti is a businessman," Marcus continued, circling her father like a shark. "He understands that sometimes investments don't pan out, but he also understands the importance of examples, of making sure others know that debts aren't suggestions. They're obligations." One of the other men, thick-necked, with knuckles that looked like they'd been broken and healed badly, cracked those knuckles now. The sound was obscenely loud in the small room. "So here's what's going to happen," Marcus said. "You're going to come with us. We're going to have a conversation about responsibility, about consequences. And when we're done, everyone in this city will understand what happens when you borrow from Victor Moretti and think you can walk away." Thomas Carter started to cry. Not dignified tears, ugly, desperate sobs that shook his whole body. Elena felt nothing watching him break. The man who was supposed to protect her, guide her, be her father had spent years proving he was only good at one thing, saving himself. "Wait," Thomas gasped. "Wait, please. I have something valuable." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Unless you've been hiding a Rembrandt in your closet, I doubt my daughter." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Elena's blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. The room tilted slightly. She gripped the banister to steady herself, her knuckles going white. "Excuse me?" Marcus's voice held the first trace of genuine curiosity. Thomas pointed at Elena with a shaking hand. "She's smart, beautiful, educated. She went to college 2 years before the money ran out. She could be useful to Mr. Moretti as an assistant, or..." He couldn't finish, couldn't say the words, but they hung there anyway, ugly and naked and true. He was offering his daughter as payment for his debts. Marcus turned to look at Elena for the first time. Really look at her. His gaze was clinical, assessing, the way someone might evaluate a used car or a piece of furniture. She felt it move over her face, her body, cataloging and calculating. "Interesting," he murmured. Elena found her voice. It came out steadier than she expected. "No." Her father's head snapped up. "Elena, please, you don't understand. These men will kill you?" She descended 2 steps, her eyes locked on Marcus. "Yes, I understand that. And you know what? You earned it." The room went very quiet. "You gambled away Mom's life insurance," Elena continued, each word sharp and precise. "You lost Jake's college fund at a poker table. You mortgaged the house 3 times. You sold everything that wasn't nailed down, and then you started selling things that were. So no, Dad, I'm not going to become collateral for your failures. You made this mess. You die in it." Thomas made a sound like a wounded animal. "I'm your father, biologically." Elena's voice was ice. "In every other way that matters, you stopped being my father the day you chose cards over your family." Marcus was smiling now. Not a warm smile, something colder, more interested, like he'd just discovered an unexpected variable in an equation. "Ms. Carter," he said, "you seem like a practical woman. Let me be practical with you. Your father owes $300,000. He cannot pay. This means we will take payment in other forms. Normally, that involves breaking bones until the message gets through to others who might be considering not paying, but..." He paused, tilted his head. "Mr. Moretti does occasionally have need of intelligent people, people who can think, who can adapt, who don't break easily." His eyes glittered. "You're right that you're not responsible for your father's debts. But you live in this house. You benefit, however minimally, from his existence. In our world, that creates a connection, a relationship of liability." "That's not how the law works," Elena said. "We're not talking about the law." Marcus spread his hands. "We're talking about survival, yours and his. Here's the offer, and it's the only one you'll get. Come work for Mr. Moretti. Prove yourself useful. If you do, your father's debt is forgiven. He lives, you live, everyone walks away. And if I refuse, then we complete our original business with your father, and you get to spend the rest of your life knowing you could have saved him and chose not to." Marcus shrugged. "Either way, my afternoon proceeds. The only question is how much blood gets spilled first." Elena looked at her father, still kneeling, still crying, still pathetic. She felt a war raging inside her, hatred and pity and disgust and something that might have been love once, long ago, before it got buried under years of disappointment. She should let them take him, should let him face the consequences of his choices, should walk away and start over somewhere far from this rotting house and these dangerous men in the wreckage of her family. "But what kind of work?" she asked. Marcus smiled wider. "Whatever Mr. Moretti needs. Administrative tasks, research, analysis. You'd be surprised how much of running a criminal empire is actually just paperwork and logistics. And if I'm not useful, then the debt remains, and we revisit this conversation with less pleasant options on the table." Elena closed her eyes, took a breath, opened them again. "I want to meet him first, Victor Moretti. Before I agree to anything, I want to look him in the eye and hear this from him directly." Marcus considered this. "That's bold. People don't usually make demands when they're negotiating from a position of total weakness. I'm not negotiating. I'm establishing boundaries. If I'm going to work for someone, I need to know who they are, what they are. If Mr. Moretti is too important to meet the woman he's acquiring, then he's not someone I'm interested in working for. One of the other men, the thick-necked one, laughed. This bitch has balls, Marcus. Watch your mouth, Marcus said mildly, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He turned back to Elena. All right, Mr. Moretti values courage, even when it's probably stupidity in disguise. We'll take you to him. Now. Now? Did you have other plans? A hot date? A job interview? Marcus gestured to the decrepit room. This is your life, Ms. Carter. Entropy and debt. We're offering you a door out. I suggest you walk through it before it closes. Elena looked at her father one last time. He was staring at her with desperate hope, like she was a lottery ticket that might finally pay off. The irony wasn't lost on her. If I do this, she said quietly, I never want to see you again. Whatever happens, wherever I go, you stay out of my life. Forever. Elena, sweetheart, those are my terms. For him, she nodded at Marcus, and for you, I save your worthless life, and you give me the dignity of disappearing from mine. Thomas Carter opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he nodded, tears streaming down his face. Touching, Marcus said. Now let's go. Mr. Moretti is a busy man. Chetam. The car was a black Mercedes S-Class, the kind with windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside even in direct sunlight. Elena was directed to the back seat, Marcus beside her, the thick-necked man driving, two others in a follow car behind them. As they pulled away from the house, Elena looked back once, saw her father standing in the doorway, small and broken and alone. Then they turned a corner, and he was gone. Good riddance. The ride took 40 minutes, winding through the city from the decaying neighborhood where Elena had grown up to the gleaming downtown district where glass towers scraped the sky and money flowed like water. They entered an underground parking garage, descended 3 levels, and parked in a space marked private. This way, Marcus said. They took an elevator that required a key card and a fingerprint scan. It rose smoothly, silently, the numbers climbing, 30, 40, 50, finally stopping at 62. The doors opened onto a private foyer that was larger than Elena's entire house. Marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than her college tuition, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that made it look small and manageable and completely under control. Wait here, Marcus said, then disappeared through a set of double doors. Elena stood in the center of the foyer, acutely aware of how out of place she looked. She was wearing jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup. She looked like exactly what she was, a broke 23-year-old from a dying neighborhood, drowning in someone else's mistakes. The double doors opened. Miss Carter, Marcus said, Mr. Moretti will see you now. She walked through the doors into a vast office that occupied the entire floor. More windows, more art, more evidence of wealth so profound it had stopped being about money and become about power itself. And in the center of it all, standing with his back to her, looking out at the city he controlled, was Victor Moretti. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out a charcoal suit that probably cost $10,000. His hair was dark with threads of silver, cut short and precise. When he turned, Elena saw a face that was handsome in a harsh, angular way. High cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green, like the ocean before a storm. He was 42, she'd learn later. At the height of his power, the head of an empire built on legitimate businesses and illegitimate violence, a man who moved through the world like he owned it, because, in most of the ways that mattered, he did. Elena Carter, he said. His voice was deep, cultured, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent smoothed away by years of American schools and American business. My associate tells me you have conditions. I have questions, Elena corrected. Victor's eyebrow rose fractionally. Most people in your position are too terrified to speak, let alone ask questions. Then most people in my position are idiots. Elena kept her voice level, her gaze steady. Fear doesn't change my situation. Understanding might. A smile ghosted across Victor's face. All right, ask. What happens if I fail? If I'm not useful to you? Then your father's debt remains, and Marcus handles it in the traditional way, which means you kill him. Eventually, after he served as an example, Victor walked to a bar cart, poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid. He didn't offer her any. But you're asking the wrong question. What's the right question? What happens if you succeed? Victor took a sip, his eyes never leaving hers. If you prove yourself valuable, Elena, the debt disappears. Your father lives. And you get something much more interesting than freedom. Which is purpose, power, a chance to be more than the daughter of a degenerate gambler slowly rotting in a forgotten house. He set down his glass. You're smart. I can see it in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak. You went to college, studied business and economics before the money ran out. You're wasted on a life of poverty and mediocrity. How do you know what I studied? I know everything about you, Elena. Your grades, excellent. Your employment history, sporadic, underemployed. Your relationships, none serious, nobody worth mentioning. Your debts, minimal, because you're careful with money even when you have none. You're disciplined, intelligent, and completely trapped in a life going nowhere. Victor leaned against his desk. I'm offering you a way out. By making me a criminal. By making you powerful. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The law is a framework created by the powerful to control the weak. I operate above it, around it, through it. The people in this city who matter, the politicians, the business leaders, the ones who actually shape the world, they all understand this. The only question is whether you're brave enough to understand it too. Elena felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not anymore. Something sharper. Hunger, maybe. Or recognition. She'd spent her whole life playing by rules that only seemed to benefit people who were already winning. She'd watched her mother die because they couldn't afford better treatment. Watched her brother spiral because there was no support system for kids from neighborhoods like theirs. Watched her father gamble away any chance at a better life because the legitimate path offered nothing but slow decay. What had playing by the rules gotten her? Nothing. Less than nothing. I'll need to know exactly what you expect from me, Elena said. Job description, hours, boundaries. Victor smiled fully now. You'll work as my analyst. I have investments, real estate, art, businesses both legal and less so. You'll research them, identify opportunities, flag problems. You'll attend meetings, take notes, offer opinions when asked. You'll live here, in this building, in a secured apartment. You'll have a salary, $50,000 to start, more as you prove yourself. And the illegal parts? You'll observe them. You won't participate in violence. You won't touch drugs, weapons, or anything that could directly implicate you in a crime. Your intelligence is what I need, not your willingness to get your hands dirty. I have plenty of people for that. Why? Elena asked. Why offer this to me instead of just taking what you're owed from my father? Victor walked closer, stopping a few feet from her. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar on his left cheek, the absolute certainty in his gaze. Because, Elena, I've built an empire by recognizing value where others see trash. Your father's trash. Worthless, weak, predictable. But you? You're different. You stood in that room and told your father you'd let him die. You negotiated from a position of total weakness and somehow made demands. You're here now, looking me in the eye, asking the right questions, instead of begging or crying or trying to manipulate me with feminine charm. He tilted his head, studying her. You're a survivor. More than that, you're adaptable. And in my world, adaptability is worth more than loyalty, more than strength, more than almost anything else. So I'm making a bet that you'll be useful, that you'll learn, that you'll become something more valuable than $300,000. And if you're wrong, then I'll have Marcus put a bullet in your head and dump you in the river. But I'm rarely wrong about people, Elena. I don't think I'm wrong about you. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city far below. Elena felt the weight of the moment, the absolute finality of it. If she walked out now, she'd be condemning her father to death. If she stayed, she'd be stepping into a world where death was currency and power was the only law that mattered. But what was waiting for her back in that rotting house? A minimum wage job if she was lucky, a slow slide into poverty and desperation if she wasn't. Her father's debts hanging over her head, the constant struggle just to survive, let alone thrive. Victor was offering her a chance at something more, something dangerous, certainly, possibly fatal, but also real, tangible, a path forward instead of a slow death. I want it in writing, Elena said. The terms, the debt forgiveness, everything. Victor's smile was approving. Marcus will draw up the paperwork. You'll sign it tonight. And then, Elena Carter, your old life ends and your new one begins. He extended his hand. Elena looked at it for a long moment, saw her future splitting in two, one path leading back to poverty and powerlessness, the other into darkness and possibility. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, absolutely confident. Welcome, Victor Moretti said, to the real world. What? The apartment they gave her was on the 58th floor, 4 stories below Victor's penthouse. It was larger than her house had been, with floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, a kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use, and a bathroom with a tub the size of a small swimming pool. Marcus had left her there with a key card, a credit card, for necessities, and instructions to report to Victor's office at 8 a.m. sharp. Elena stood at the window, looking out at the city lights, and felt untethered. Like gravity had stopped working and she was floating in space, nothing to hold on to, nothing familiar, nothing safe. She'd sold herself. Not in the traditional way, perhaps, but sold herself nonetheless. Traded her freedom, such as it was, for her father's life and a chance at something better. Or worse. She wasn't sure which. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Welcome to the family. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we see what you're made of. VM. Elena stared at the message for a long time. Then she looked around the apartment again, the expensive furniture, the designer artwork, the evidence of wealth beyond anything she'd ever experienced. She should feel grateful, relieved, lucky even. Instead, she felt hungry. Victor had been right about one thing. She was tired of being powerless. Tired of watching life happen to her instead of making it happen for herself. If she was going to survive in this new world, she needed to be more than just useful. She needed to be indispensable. Elena walked to the bathroom, started the shower, made the water as hot as she could stand. As steam filled the room, she looked at herself in the mirror. At the face of the girl who'd grown up in a rotting house with a broken family and no future worth mentioning. That girl was gone. Whoever she became next would be someone stronger. Someone who understood that the world was divided into the people who took and the people who got taken from. Elena had spent her whole life in the second category. Tomorrow, she'd start learning how to join the first. She stepped into the shower, let the hot water wash away the smell of her father's desperation, and began to plan. The next morning, Elena dressed in the only professional clothes she owned, a black pencil skirt and white blouse she'd bought for job interviews that never led anywhere. She'd slept poorly, dreams full of her father's crying and Marcus's cold smile and Victor's gray-green eyes measuring her worth. At 7:55 a.m., she stepped into the elevator and rode it to the 62nd floor. Marcus was waiting in the foyer. Punctual. Good. Mr. Moretti values punctuality. He led her through the double doors into Victor's office. Victor was at his desk, working through a stack of papers with the focused intensity of a surgeon performing an operation. Elena, he said without looking up, there's a laptop on the side table. Password is set. Your first assignment is on the desktop. I want your analysis by noon. Elena moved to the side table, opened the laptop. The desktop contained a single folder labeled Riverside Gallery. Inside were financial statements, appraisal documents, and photographs of artwork, paintings, sculptures, installations. The numbers were staggering. The gallery had been acquired 6 months ago for $12 million. According to the documents, it was now valued at $18 million. But something was wrong. Elena spent the next 3 hours digging through the files, cross-referencing sales records with market prices, comparing the appraised values to auction results for similar works. The more she dug, the clearer the picture became. At 11:45, she stood and walked to Victor's desk. He looked up. Well? You're being robbed, Elena said. Victor's expression didn't change. Explain. The Riverside Gallery. Your gallery director, Marcus Chen, has been buying forged paintings and passing them off as genuine. The appraisals are fake, probably written by someone on his payroll. You paid $12 million for a collection that's worth maybe $4 million, and the markup to 18 is completely fictional. If you tried to sell any of these pieces at auction, you'd be laughed out of the room. She placed the laptop on his desk, pulled up a side-by-side comparison of one painting, supposedly a minor work by a respected abstract expressionist, and an auction result for a genuine piece by the same artist. This painting was appraised at $400,000. Similar works by the same artist sold at auction for between $60,000 and $90,000. The brushwork is wrong, the canvas preparation is wrong, and if you look closely at the signature, you can see it was added after the fact. The paint oxidized differently than the rest of the piece. Victor leaned forward, studying the images. How do you know this? My mother loved art. Before she got sick, she used to take me to museums, galleries, auctions. She taught me how to look at paintings, how to see the difference between real skill and competent imitation. Elena pulled up another file. And I minored in art history. I might not be an expert, but I know enough to spot when someone's running a con. Victor was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone, pressed a button. Marcus. My office. Now. He hung up, looked at Elena. If you're wrong about this, you've just made a serious enemy. I'm not wrong. We'll see. Marcus entered a minute later. You needed me. Tell me about the Riverside Gallery, Victor said calmly. How confident are you in the valuations? Marcus's eyes flickered to Elena, then back to Victor. Completely confident. I vetted Marcus Chen personally. His credentials are impeccable. Are they? Victor turned the laptop around, showed Marcus the same comparison Elena had found. Because my new analyst just spent 3 hours tearing apart your due diligence and concluded that we've been sold a gallery full of expensive forgeries. The color drained from Marcus's face. That's not possible. I verified everything. The appraisals came from a respected firm. Which firm? Anderson and Lee. They've been in business for 30 years. And according to Elena's research, they've been under investigation for fraud for the past 6 months. Victor's voice remained calm, but something dangerous crept into his eyes. Want to explain how you missed that? Marcus looked at Elena like she'd just stabbed him. She's been here one day, and she's already found a multi-million-dollar hole in our operation that you, with all your experience, completely missed. So I'll ask again, how did this happen? I trusted the documentation. I didn't think... That's exactly right. You didn't think. Victor stood, walked around the desk. I'm going to give you 24 hours to investigate this. If Elena's right, I want to know how deep the fraud goes, who's responsible, and how we're going to recover our losses. If she's wrong, I want proof that's so solid even she can't argue with it. Understood? Yes, sir. Marcus shot Elena one more look, pure venom, and left. When the door closed, Victor turned to Elena. That was either very brave or very stupid. It was necessary. If you're going to trust me with analysis, I can't be afraid to tell you when something's wrong, even when it makes you enemies. Especially then. Sugarcoating bad news doesn't change the facts. It just delays the problem and makes it worse. Victor studied her for a moment, then laughed. A genuine sound of surprise and approval. You're exactly what I thought you were. Maybe more. We'll see in 24 hours. If I'm wrong, you're not wrong. I can tell from Marcus's reaction. Victor returned to his desk. He's either incompetent or complicit. Either way, he's a problem now. You just made yourself valuable and made him expendable. That's dangerous. For him or for me? Both. Marcus has been with me for 8 years. He's loyal, effective, and now he sees you as a threat. Watch your back. I always do. Victor smiled. Good. Go get lunch. Be back at 2. I have a meeting with some business partners, and I want you there taking notes. Elena nodded and left. In the elevator, her hands started to shake. Not from fear, from adrenaline. She just burned a bridge with Victor's right-hand man on her first day. Most people would call that suicidal, but Elena saw it differently. She'd proven herself valuable, proven she could see things others missed, speak truth to power, deliver results. In Victor's world, that was currency worth more than Marcus's 8 years of loyalty. She was in the game now, really in it, and she was going to win. 23 hours later, Marcus stood in Victor's office, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, his usual composed demeanor shattered. "Well?" Victor asked. She was right. About everything. Marcus placed a thick folder on the desk. Anderson and Lee were running a sophisticated forgery ring. They'd authenticate fake pieces, inflate the values, and split the profits with gallery directors. Marcus Chen was in on it from the beginning. The Riverside Gallery collection is worth approximately $4.2 million. We lost $7.8 million. Victor's jaw tightened. And Chen? Disappeared. Emptied his accounts yesterday afternoon and fled the country, probably tipped off by someone at Anderson and Lee. Find him. Already on it. We'll have him within the week. Good. When you do, make sure everyone understands what happens to people who steal from me. Victor opened the folder, scanned the contents. What about recovery? We can sell the legitimate pieces for around $4 million. I've identified 3 Anderson and Lee partners who have assets we can seize. We'll recover maybe half our losses if we move quickly. Do it. And Marcus? Yes, sir? You're off acquisition duty until further notice. Every purchase over $1 million gets reviewed by 2 independent analysts before completion. And Victor glanced at Elena, who was sitting quietly in the corner. Elena signs off on anything art-related. Clear? Marcus's face flushed, but he nodded. Crystal. When he left, Victor turned to Elena. You just cost a man his pride and possibly his position. How does that feel? Like I did my job, Elena said simply. No guilt? No concern about making enemies? Should I feel guilty for being right? Should I apologize for doing what you hired me to do? Elena stood, walked to the window. Marcus made a mistake. Either he was incompetent or corrupt. Either way, it cost you millions. I exposed it. If he's smart, he'll learn from it and get better. If he's not, he'll resent me and try to undermine me. And if he does, then I'll handle it. Or you will. But I won't apologize for being good at my job just because it makes someone else look bad at theirs. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. You're going to be trouble, Elena Carter. The very best kind of trouble. He pulled a box from his desk drawer, slid it across to her. Inside was a black credit card with her name embossed in silver. Your performance bonus, 50,000 limit. Buy yourself some proper clothes, get whatever you need for the apartment. Consider it a thank you for saving me $7 million in future losses. Elena looked at the card, felt its weight. A month ago, she'd been counting pennies for bus fare. Now she was holding a credit card with a limit that exceeded what her father owed. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Earn it every day. Victor's smile faded. This world will chew you up if you let it. You've made a strong start, but that just means the next test will be harder, and the one after that harder still. Never stop proving yourself, Elena. The moment you coast is the moment you become disposable. I understand. Good. Now go. I have a shipment arriving tonight that needs to be verified. I want you there. What kind of shipment? The kind that comes in containers and doesn't show up on any manifest. You'll observe, you'll learn, and you'll keep your mouth shut unless I ask you a direct question. This is your education in how the real empire works. Elena nodded and left. As she rode the elevator down to her apartment, she felt the weight of the credit card in her pocket, the weight of Victor's expectations on her shoulders, the weight of the choice she'd made. There was no going back now. She'd stepped into the darkness, and the darkness had welcomed her with open arms. Now she just had to make sure it didn't swallow her whole. The shipment arrived at 2 a.m. at a warehouse in the industrial district, where the streetlights had been conveniently broken and security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned on a regular schedule. Elena sat in the back of Victor's armored SUV, watching men move like shadows through the darkness, their movements efficient and practiced. Stay close to me, Victor said as they exited the vehicle. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you see tonight, you forget by morning. Understood? Understood. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, and something else, something chemical that made Elena's nose wrinkle. Inside, a shipping container sat open, its contents being systematically unloaded by a crew of 6 men. Marcus supervised, his earlier humiliation replaced by cold professionalism. Elena watched as crate after crate emerged. Not drugs, as she'd half expected. Not weapons. Electronics. High-end components, microprocessors, server equipment. The kind of technology that had export restrictions, that couldn't legally be shipped to certain countries, that commanded premium prices on black markets. 12 million in hardware, Victor said quietly, standing beside her. Destined for buyers in 3 countries that the US government doesn't approve of. My cut is 40%. The manufacturer thinks these units were destroyed in a warehouse fire. The buyers think they're getting a discount on stolen goods. Everyone's happy, except the government. The government makes rules to protect the interests of people who can afford lobbyists. I'm simply providing a service to those who can't. Victor's voice held no defensiveness, no justification, just fact. The world runs on hypocrisy, Elena. The sooner you understand that, the better you'll navigate it. One of the workers dropped a crate. It hit the concrete with a crash that echoed through the warehouse. Everyone froze. Marcus was on the man in seconds, his hand wrapped around the worker's throat. You stupid... Enough! Victor's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Check the contents. If it's damaged, dock his pay. If it's fine, let him get back to work. We're on a schedule. Marcus released the man, who gasped and stumbled backward. 2 others carefully opened the crate, inspected the contents, gave a thumbs up. See, Victor said to Elena, even in chaos, there's order. Even in crime, there's professionalism. The only difference between what I do and what legitimate businesses do is that I admit what I am. Elena watched Marcus supervise the rest of the unloading with renewed intensity, clearly trying to prove his competence after the gallery disaster. The other men worked in silence, each knowing their role, moving like parts of a well-oiled machine. This was power, not the kind that came from governments or laws or democratic processes. The kind that came from controlling what people needed, understanding what they wanted, and being willing to provide it regardless of the rules. How often do you do this? Elena asked. Often enough to keep the empire running, not so often that patterns emerge. Victor checked his watch. This operation will be completed in 40 minutes. The container will be reported as empty and recycled. The hardware will be in 3 different countries by next week. And $12 million will flow through various accounts until it emerges clean, legitimate, and taxable. You pay taxes on this? Of course. The IRS doesn't care where money comes from as long as they get their cut. It's the one government agency that's truly honest about its intentions. Victor smiled. You look troubled. I'm not. Liar, you're wondering what kind of person you're becoming, working for someone who does this. Elena met his gaze. No, I'm wondering why I don't feel more troubled by it. I should be horrified, morally outraged. Instead, I'm just fascinated. That's because you're practical. Morality is a luxury for people who don't have to make hard choices. Victor gestured to the warehouse. Every person in this room has a story. Most of them involve poverty, desperation, or circumstances beyond their control. I pay them well, I protect them, and I give them opportunities they'd never have in the legitimate world. Am I a criminal? Yes. Am I worse than the CEO who poisons a river to save money on waste disposal, then pays a fine that's a fraction of the profits? I don't think so. The last crate was loaded onto a truck. Marcus approached, nodded to Victor. We're clear, 18 minutes ahead of schedule. Good. Make sure everyone gets a bonus. Clean work deserves clean pay. Marcus hesitated, glanced at Elena, then back to Victor. Sir, about the gallery situation. We'll discuss it tomorrow. Tonight went well. Let's end on a positive note. It was a dismissal, and Marcus knew it. He nodded stiffly and walked away. On the drive back, Victor was quiet, staring out at the city lights. Finally, he spoke. You've been here 2 weeks, given me more value than most people provide in 2 years. I'm curious. What do you want, Elena? Long term. The question caught her off guard. I don't understand. Everyone wants something. Money, power, security, revenge. What drives you? What keeps you awake at night wanting more? Elena considered lying, offering some sanitized version of ambition that would sound acceptable. But Victor had been honest with her. brutally so. She owed him the same. "I want to never be powerless again," she said quietly. "I want to look at a problem and know I have the resources to solve it. I want people to think twice before trying to use me. I want to matter." "To who?" "To myself." Victor smiled. "Good answer. The moment you start needing external validation, you become controllable. But if you're doing this for yourself, for your own sense of power and purpose, then you're dangerous. The best kind of dangerous." "Is that what you are? Dangerous?" "I'm what happens when someone smart enough to see through society's lies decides to stop pretending they don't. I could have been a lawyer, a banker, a politician, but all those paths required me to bow to someone else, to play games with rules designed to keep me in my place." Victor's voice hardened. "So I made my own rules, built my own empire, and now the people who used to look down on me come to me when they need things done, when they need money laundered, problems solved, opportunities created. Do you ever regret it?" "Regret suggests I had a better option. I didn't. None of us did." He looked at her. "You'll learn that about this world, Elena. We're all here because the legitimate path failed us in some fundamental way. The only question is whether we have the strength to thrive in the alternative." The SUV pulled into the underground garage. As they rode the elevator up, Elena felt the weight of the night settling on her shoulders. She'd just witnessed a major crime, had said nothing, done nothing to stop it, was now complicit, bound to Victor not just by contract, but by shared guilt. She should feel horrified. Instead, she felt alive. The next morning brought a new challenge. Elena was reviewing investment reports in Victor's office when Marcus entered, his expression carefully neutral. "We have a situation," he said. "Antonio Russo wants a meeting." Victor's jaw tightened. "When?" "Tonight. He's invited you to dinner at Cristallo, private room." "Who's Antonio Russo?" Elena asked. Marcus looked at her like she'd asked who the president was. "He controls the port operations, shipping, imports, customs. Nothing moves through this city's waterfront without his approval." "And he's competition," Victor added. "We've had an understanding for years. He stays out of my territory, I stay out of his. If he's requesting a meeting, something's changed." "Could be an opportunity," Marcus suggested. "Or a trap." Victor stood, paced to the window. "What's the intelligence?" "Russo's been expanding, bought 3 new warehouses last month, increased his security detail, and rumor has it he's courting the Calabrian families for backing." "Ambitious," Victor's voice was flat. "Ambition makes people dangerous. It also makes them predictable." "Do you want me there?" Marcus asked. "No, I'm bringing Elena." The room went silent. Marcus stared at Victor like he'd suggested bringing a civilian to a war zone. "Sir, with all respect, this is a high-level negotiation with a potential hostile. Bringing an analyst, bringing Elena sends a message that I'm confident enough in my position to bring someone new, someone observant, someone who isn't tied to old patterns." Victor turned to Elena. "Can you handle yourself in a room full of dangerous men?" "I've been in a room full of dangerous men since the day I met you," Elena said. "What's one more?" Victor smiled. "Good. Wear something elegant. We leave at 7. Marcus opened his mouth to protest again, then thought better of it. He left without another word, his displeasure radiating like heat. When they were alone, Elena asked, "Why are you really bringing me?" "Because Antonio Russo is old school. He thinks women are decorative, non-threatening. He'll talk more freely with you in the room, thinking you're just pretty scenery. Meanwhile, you'll be reading every tell, every micro-expression, every word choice. By the end of the dinner, you'll know more about his intentions than he wants us to know. And if he's more perceptive than you think, then we'll find out just how dangerous this new world you've entered really is." Cristallo occupied the top floor of a building that predated the modern skyline, all old-money elegance and careful preservation. The private dining room overlooked the waterfront, where ships moved like distant ghosts through the darkness. Antonio Russo was 60, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Elena's former annual salary. He greeted Victor with a warm handshake that didn't reach his eyes. "Victor, too long, my friend, too long." "Antonio, you look well." "I look old, but rich, so it balances." Russo's gaze slid to Elena, appraising and dismissive in the same glance. "And who is this lovely creature?" Elena Carter, my senior analyst. Analyst, Russo smiled. Such modern titles. In my day, we called beautiful women what they were. Elena felt the insult slide over her like oil. She smiled politely, said nothing, took a seat when indicated. Victor had been right. Russo had already dismissed her as irrelevant. The dinner began with pleasantries, wine, carefully neutral topics. The food was exquisite, each course a small masterpiece. Elena ate sparingly, watched constantly. Russo's bodyguard stood by the door, still as a statue. Another man, younger, sharp-eyed, sat to Russo's right, introduced as his nephew, Dante. Dante watched Elena with more interest than his uncle, his gaze calculating rather than dismissive. "So," Russo said as the main course arrived, "I hear you've had some trouble with that gallery acquisition." Victor's expression didn't change. "Minor issue. Resolved. But expensive, no? These mistakes, they add up. Make people wonder if perhaps the great Victor Moretti is losing his touch. The only people wondering that are people hoping it's true. Are you hoping it's true, Antonio?" Russo laughed, but it was forced. "Of course not. We're friends, you and I, partners in prosperity." "Then why am I here?" The pretense evaporated. Russo set down his fork, leaned back. "Because the world is changing, Victor. New players are emerging. The Calabrians, the Russians, even the Chinese are making moves. The old arrangements, the old territories, they don't hold like they used to. And you want to renegotiate our understanding. I want to propose a merger. Your expertise in finance and technology, my control of the ports. Together, we could dominate not just this city, but the entire eastern seaboard." Victor took a sip of wine. "An interesting proposal. What would this merger look like in practical terms?" 60-40 split. I take the majority, given the infrastructure investment required, but you'd have full access to my shipping networks, my customs connections, my political relationships. 60-40 in your favor. It's fair, given the risk I'd be taking bringing you into operations at that scale. Elena watched the exchange, her mind racing. The numbers didn't make sense. Russo was offering Victor access to resources worth hundreds of millions in exchange for a minority stake in Victor's operation. Either Russo was desperate, or this was something else entirely. She caught Dante watching her, a small smile on his face. He knew she'd spotted the discrepancy, was curious whether she'd speak up. "I'll need to think about it," Victor said smoothly. Of course. These decisions, they take time." Russo gestured for more wine. "But don't take too long. Opportunities like this, they have expiration dates." "Is that a threat, Antonio?" A friendly observation between old colleagues. The rest of the dinner passed in strained civility. When they finally left, Victor said nothing until they were in the car, blocks away from Cristallo. "Well?" he asked Elena. "He's lying. The merger proposal is a smokescreen." "Explain." "The numbers are wrong. He's offering you access to resources worth far more than a 40% stake in your operation. Either he thinks you're stupid enough not to notice, or the real play is something else entirely." "Such as?" "He wants inside your organization, wants to see your financial networks, your technology operations, your client lists. Once he has that information, he doesn't need the merger. He can either replicate your business model or destroy me from the inside," Victor finished. "Very good. What else did you notice?" "His nephew, Dante. He's the real operator. Russo's old, probably losing his edge. Dante's running things now, using his uncle as a front." "And the bodyguard?" "Former military, probably special forces, given the way he scanned the room. He's not just protection, he's a message. Russo came prepared for violence if negotiation failed." Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, genuine and pleased. "You see more in one dinner than most people would in a month of surveillance. That's a rare gift, Elena." "So what do we do?" "We play along. Schedule a follow-up meeting. Make them think we're considering the offer. Meanwhile, we dig into Russo's operation, find his weak points, and prepare for war. You think it'll come to that?" Antonio Russo didn't become a major player by accepting no for an answer. When I reject his proposal, he'll either back down or attack. Given that he brought his best killer to a dinner meeting, I'm betting on attack. Elena felt ice settle in her stomach. "Then why are you smiling?" Because war is clarifying. Peace requires constant diplomacy, careful balance, endless compromise. But war? War is simple. You identify your enemy, marshal your resources, and destroy them completely. I'm very good at simple. Back at the building, Victor walked Elena to her apartment door. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow, we start preparing. I'll need you to research everything you can find on Russo's operations. Financial records, property holdings, known associates. I want to know every deal he's made in the last 5 years, every weakness in his operation. You're going to move against him. Only if he moves against me first, but when he does, I want to be ready to end it quickly. Victor's expression hardened. This world has simple rules, Elena. Respect territory, honor agreements, and never show weakness. Russo is testing all three. He needs to be reminded why people fear me. Elena nodded, entered her apartment. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in her mind. Dante Russo's calculating gaze, the bodyguard's ready stance, Antonio's forced smile and veiled threats. She'd stepped into a world where business deals could turn into blood feuds, where dinner conversations were preludes to violence, where reading people correctly could mean the difference between life and death. And the strangest part? She wasn't scared. She was exhilarated. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in preparation for war. Elena worked 18-hour days compiling intelligence on the Russo family. She discovered that Antonio's empire was larger than Victor's but less diversified, heavily dependent on port operations and shipping contracts. Dante was indeed the real power, running day-to-day operations while his uncle played figurehead. But she also found cracks. 3 of Russo's warehouses had been flagged by federal investigators for customs violations. 2 shipping contracts were under review for environmental violations, and Dante had made enemies within the Italian families, younger men who resented his aggressive expansion. This is excellent work, Victor said, reviewing her report. We can use these pressure points, make Russo's life difficult without directly confronting him. But he'll know it's you. Of course. That's the point. I want him to understand the cost of threatening me. Want him to reconsider his position before this escalates further. Marcus entered the office, his expression grim. We have a problem. 2 of our shipping containers were seized at the port this morning. Customs claims they received an anonymous tip about illegal electronics. Victor's face went cold. Russo. Has to be. The timing's too perfect. He's sending a message. Then we send one back. Victor stood, walked to the window. Elena, how much damage could we do to Russo's environmental violations? I could leak the evidence to the EPA and 3 major news outlets, create enough scrutiny that his contracts would be suspended pending investigation. Cost him maybe $10 million in the short term, potentially more if the violations are serious enough for fines. Do it. Marcus, I want surveillance on Dante Russo, where he goes, who he meets with, what he eats for breakfast. If he's running the operation, he's our real target. And Antonio? Leave him for now. He's a symbol. Attacking him directly would unite the Italian families against us. But Dante? He's made enough enemies that his removal could look like internal politics rather than our doing. Elena felt a chill. You're planning to kill him? Only if necessary. Preferably, we discredit him, turn him into a liability for Antonio. Force the old man to remove his nephew himself. Victor's voice was calm, methodical. Violence is a tool, Elena. Sometimes the best tool, but never the only one. Smart operators use it sparingly, strategically. Over the next week, Elena's leaked information hit the news. Federal investigators descended on Russo's operations. 2 major shipping contracts were suspended. The environmental violations turned into a full-scale scandal. Russo's response was swift and brutal. Elena was leaving the building one evening when a black van pulled alongside her. The door slid open. Hands grabbed her, pulled her inside before she could scream. A cloth pressed over her mouth. Chemical smell. Darkness. She woke in a concrete room, hands zip-tied behind her back, head pounding. The space was small, windowless, lit by a single bulb. Industrial area, judging by the distant sound of machinery. The door opened. Dante Russo entered, dressed casually, looking almost bored. Miss Carter, sorry about the rough treatment. We needed to talk privately. Elena's mouth was dry, but she forced her voice steady. This is how you conduct business meetings? When the person I need to talk to is under Victor Moretti's protection, yes. Dante pulled up a chair, sat backward on it, arms crossed over the back. You're the one who leaked the environmental violations, aren't you? The anonymous tip to the EPA came from a burner phone, but the information was too detailed, too precise. Had to come from someone with serious research skills. If you already know, why ask? Because I want you to understand something. You're smart, clearly talented, but you're working for the wrong person. Dante leaned forward. Victor's empire is built on old models. Technology smuggling, money laundering, art fraud. It's profitable, sure, but it's limited. My uncle and I, we control infrastructure, real physical power. The port moves $1 billion in goods every month. Control that, and you control the entire regional economy. So this is a recruitment pitch? You kidnapped me to offer me a job? I kidnapped you to make a point. Victor cares about you. I can see it in the way he brought you to dinner, the way he's been grooming you. That makes you valuable. As a hostage, as leverage, or as an asset, I turn against him. I'm not interested in betraying Victor. Not even to save your own life. Dante's smile was cold. I could kill you right now. Dump your body where it'll never be found. Send Victor a message about interfering in my family's business. But you won't. Oh? Why not? Because Victor would declare open war on your family. Your uncle's old, losing influence. You're trying to consolidate power, but you've made enemies. You can't afford a war with Victor right now. It would give your rivals the opening they need to move against you. Dante stared at her for a long moment, then laughed. See? This is why I want you. You think like a chess player. Victor just taught you well, or were you always this sharp? Does it matter? I suppose not. Dante stood. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to let you go. You're going to tell Victor that I could have killed you, but chose mercy. And you're going to deliver a message. Back off. Stop interfering with my operations, and I'll stop interfering with his. Continue this petty war, and next time you won't wake up in a room with a chair. You'll wake up in a shallow grave. Victor doesn't respond well to threats. Then I guess we'll see which one of us is better at violence. Dante walked to the door, knocked twice. 2 men entered, cut Elena's zip ties. My guys will drop you 3 blocks from your building. Consider this your one free pass, Ms. Carter. Next time we meet, I won't be so generous. They drove her in silence, dumped her on a street corner at 11 p.m. Elena stumbled, caught herself, watched the van drive away. Then she ran. Victor was in his office when she burst in, Marcus beside him. Both men stood immediately at the sight of her, disheveled, wrists bruised from the zip ties, eyes blazing with fury and adrenaline. Elena. Victor crossed the room in 3 strides. What happened? She told them everything. The kidnapping, Dante's message, the threat. As she spoke, Victor's expression went from concern to dangerous, something cold and lethal settling over his features. Marcus, he said quietly, activate the security team. Full lockdown on all properties. I want 24-hour protection on Elena, and I want Dante Russo's current location in the next hour. Sir, now. Marcus left without another word. Victor turned back to Elena, gently took her wrists, examined the bruises. Did they hurt you? I'm fine. Shaken, but fine. They touched you, put their hands on you, threatened you. Victor's voice was ice. That's a line they don't get to cross. It was a message. He let me go to prove he could have killed me. I understand the message. Here's my reply. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call. It's me. I need a full tactical team assembled by tomorrow night. Heavy weapons, experienced operators. Budget is unlimited. He paused. Because we're going to war. He hung up, looked at Elena. Go to your apartment, lock the door. 2 of my best men will be stationed outside. Don't leave until I come get you. Victor, if you escalate this, they escalated it the moment they touched you. I'm just finishing it. His eyes were storm gray, absolutely certain. In this world, Elena, you protect what's yours. You've become valuable to me, important. That means anyone who threatens you is threatening me, and I don't tolerate threats. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, not gratitude, something more complex, more dangerous. She'd become important to Victor Moretti, important enough that her kidnapping had just started a war. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. "What I should have done the moment Russo proposed that merger. I'm going to remind this city why people fear my name." Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window of her apartment, watching the city lights blur and sharpen through the glass. Two of Victor's men stationed outside her door like silent sentinels. Her wrists still ached where the zip ties had cut into her skin, faint purple bruises blooming beneath the surface. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold fury that had settled in her chest. Dante Russo had made a mistake. He'd assumed she was just another piece on Victor's board, disposable, replaceable. He'd thought fear would make her weak. He was wrong. At dawn, Victor's knock pulled her from her thoughts. She opened the door to find him dressed in black tactical clothing, his usual expensive suits replaced by something far more ominous. His face was set in hard lines, the careful civility he usually wore stripped away to reveal something darker underneath. "Come with me," he said. She followed him to the elevator, down to the parking garage where 3 SUVs waited, engines running. Men she'd never seen before occupied the vehicles, each one carrying themselves with the same dangerous stillness as Victor's usual security detail, but multiplied, intensified. These weren't bodyguards. These were soldiers. "Where are we going?" Elena asked as they climbed into the middle vehicle. "To make a statement." Victor's voice was flat, emotionless. "The Russo family is hosting a charity gala tonight at the Grandview Hotel. Every major family in the city will be there. Politicians, business leaders, the kind of people who pretend they don't know where their campaign contributions really come from." "You're going to attack them there? In public?" "No, I'm going to humiliate them. Show everyone watching that the Russo family can't even protect their own, let alone expand their territory." Victor pulled out a tablet, showed her a layout of the hotel. "Dante will be there, playing the dutiful nephew. So will Antonio, playing the respected businessman. We're going to expose them both for exactly what they are." "How?" "You remember those environmental violations you leaked? Turns out they're worse than even you found. Much worse. Russo's been dumping chemical waste into the harbor for 3 years, paying off inspectors to look the other way. I have documentation, photographs, testimony from workers who were told to keep quiet." Victor's smile was razor sharp. "We're going to release everything tonight. Every news outlet, every regulatory agency, every politician who's ever shaken Antonio Russo's hand. By morning, the Russo family won't be powerful criminals. They'll be toxic pariahs. That will destroy them financially, but Dante won't stop. He'll retaliate." "Let him try." Victor's eyes were cold. "I have teams positioned at every Russo property. Warehouses, offices, personal residences. The moment Dante makes a move, we strike. Hard, fast, and everywhere at once. By the time he realizes what's happening, his entire operation will be in flames." Elena felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just strategy anymore. This was war. Real, total, devastating war. "You're using me as bait," she said quietly. "I'm using you as a catalyst. Dante threatened you because he thought you were weak, thought Victor Moretti's girl would break under pressure. Tonight, you're going to show him exactly how wrong he was." "I don't understand." Victor handed her a garment bag. "Inside is everything you need: dress, jewelry, credentials. You're going to that gala as my guest. You're going to stand beside me while I destroy the Russo family. And when Dante sees you there, alive and defiant, he'll understand that his intimidation tactics failed, that touching you was the worst mistake he ever made." Elena unzipped the bag. Inside was a black evening gown, elegant and dangerous, the kind of dress that commanded attention, diamond earrings that probably cost more than her father's debt, an invitation embossed in gold. "You want me to parade in front of the man who kidnapped me. I want you to show him that you're not afraid, that we're not afraid." Victor's voice softened slightly. "I won't force you, Elena. If you want to stay here, stay safe, I'll understand. But if you want to be part of this world, really part of it, then you need to understand that power isn't just about being smart or useful. It's about being willing to walk into the lion's den and smile while you burn it down around them." Elena looked at the dress, felt its weight in her hands. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane, that going to that gala was suicide, that she should lock herself in her apartment and wait for the storm to pass. But another part of her, the part that had watched her father kneel and beg, the part that had stood in Victor's office and demanded to meet him face to face, the part that had survived being collateral and become something more, that part whispered something different. Show them what you are. What time should I be ready? She asked. Victor's smile was genuine, almost proud. 7 o'clock. And Elena? Wear your hair down. Let them see your face. I want Dante Russo to spend all night looking at the woman he thought he could break. The Grandview Hotel was a monument to old money, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers and carefully preserved elegance. The charity gala was in full swing when Elena and Victor arrived, the city's elite mingling in their designer clothes and practiced smiles, pretending their wealth was earned rather than inherited or stolen. Elena wore the black dress like armor, her hair falling in dark waves past her shoulders, the diamond earrings catching the light with every movement. Victor walked beside her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. Heads turned, conversations paused. Everyone knew who Victor Moretti was, and most knew better than to acknowledge him too openly. But they watched from the corners of their eyes, measuring, calculating, wondering what his presence meant. There, Victor murmured, nodding toward the far side of the ballroom. Antonio Russo stood surrounded by admirers, holding court like a king. He wore his expensive suit and practiced charm like a costume, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, shaking hands that probably didn't want to shake his. Beside him, Dante watched the room with predatory attention, his gaze sweeping across faces until it landed on Elena. She saw the recognition hit him, saw his expression shift from bored surveillance to shock to something darker. He said something to his uncle, and Antonio's head turned. The old man's face went pale. They know, Elena said quietly. Good. Let them sweat. Victor guided her toward the bar, ordered champagne neither of them would drink. In 15 minutes, every phone in this room will start buzzing. News alerts, emergency calls from PR teams, frantic messages from lawyers. The Russo family is about to become the scandal of the decade. And when Dante realizes you orchestrated it, he already knows. That's why he looks like he's trying to decide between running and attacking. Big Victor's voice was calm, almost amused. Watch him. He's about to make a choice that will define the rest of his very short life. Dante was moving through the crowd now, not toward them, but toward the exit, trying to leave before the bomb dropped. But Victor had anticipated that too. 2 of his men, dressed as hotel security, blocked the doors. Polite, professional, impossible to bypass without causing a scene, Dante turned, his eyes locking on Victor across the ballroom. For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then the phone started buzzing. It began as a trickle, a few people pulling out devices to check messages. Then more. Then everyone. The murmur of polite conversation shifted to something sharper, more urgent. Elena watched faces change as people read headlines, saw photographs, understood what they were looking at. Antonio Russo's environmental scandal wasn't just news. It was everywhere. Every major outlet, every local station, every political blog and investigative journalist simultaneously releasing the same damning evidence. Chemical dumps, falsified records, paid-off inspectors. 3 years of systematic pollution that had poisoned the harbor and endangered thousands of people. And all of it tied directly to the Russo family. My friends, Antonio's voice rang out, trying to maintain control. There seems to be some confusion. These allegations are completely false, a smear campaign by competitors who... The EPA has already issued a statement, someone shouted. They're opening a criminal investigation. Your shipping licenses are being suspended, another voice added. It's all over the news. The crowd began to fracture, people backing away from Antonio like he carried a disease. His carefully cultivated image of respectability crumbled in real time, replaced by the reality everyone had always known but been willing to ignore. He was a criminal, a polluter, a man who'd sacrificed the health of an entire city for profit. Dante's face was carved from stone as he watched his family's empire collapse. Then his gaze shifted back to Elena, and she saw it clearly now. Not just anger, hatred, pure, undiluted, murderous hatred. He started walking toward them, Victor's hand tightened on Elena's back. Stay close to me. Victor Moretti. Dante's voice was loud enough to cut through the chaos. People turned, sensing confrontation. You think you're clever? Think you can destroy my family and walk away? I think your family destroyed itself, Victor replied calmly. I just made sure everyone knew about it. You leaked confidential information, bribed sources. This is corporate warfare. No, Dante, this is justice. Your family has been poisoning this city for years. Someone needed to stop you. Victor's smile was cold. Consider it a public service. You're a hypocrite. Everything you've built is criminal. Perhaps, but I've never pretended to be anything else. Your uncle, though, he's been playing the respectable businessman while dumping toxins into the water where children swim. That's not crime. That's evil. Dante's hand moved toward his jacket. Elena saw it in slow motion, the deliberate reach, the positioning that suggested a concealed weapon. Victor's men were already moving, hands inside their own jackets, ready to draw. I wouldn't. Marcus appeared beside Dante, his voice quiet but deadly. You're in a room full of witnesses. You pull that gun, and you're not walking out of here. Not tonight, not ever. Dante froze, his hand hovering. The entire ballroom had gone silent, everyone watching the standoff with the horrified fascination of people witnessing a car crash. You took something from me, Dante said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. My reputation, my family's future, everything we built. You took something from me first. Victor's voice dropped to something dangerous. You put your hands on someone under my protection. You thought you could intimidate, threaten, use fear as a weapon. So I'm teaching you a lesson. In this city, there are lines you don't cross. She was one of them. Dante's eyes shifted to Elena. You're just his whore. A pretty thing he parades around to make himself feel powerful. Elena stepped forward before Victor could respond. Her voice was steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. I'm the woman who found every illegal thing your family's done for the past 3 years. I'm the one who compiled the evidence, traced the payments, identified the witnesses. I'm the reason your empire is burning. She smiled, cold and certain. And when you grabbed me off the street, when you tied me up and threatened me, all you did was prove you're exactly as stupid as I thought you were. Dante's face flushed dark red. You bitch! Call me whatever you want. It doesn't change the facts. Your uncle is finished. Your operation is compromised. And you? You're a footnote in someone else's success story. Elena took another step closer, her voice dropping to something only Dante could hear. Victor Moretti didn't destroy you. I did. Remember that. For a moment, Elena thought Dante might actually pull his weapon, might decide that murder in front of 200 witnesses was worth it. But Marcus's hand was on his shoulder now, gripped tight enough to be painful, and more of Victor's men had materialized from the crowd. Leave, Marcus said quietly, while you still can. Dante shook off his hand, straightened his jacket. This isn't over. Yes, Victor said. It is. You just haven't accepted it yet. Dante turned and walked toward the exit, his uncle hurrying after him, both men leaving behind the wreckage of their reputation and the stunned silence of the city's elite. The moment they were gone, the ballroom erupted in frantic conversation. People pulled out phones, made calls, began the careful process of distancing themselves from the Russo family. Political allies became former acquaintances. Business partners discovered pressing reasons to terminate contracts. The machinery of social exile ground into motion with ruthless efficiency. Victor guided Elena toward a quiet corner, away from the chaos. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, I did. He needed to know that I wasn't your accessory, that I was the architect of his downfall. Elena's hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with her. I'm tired of being underestimated. After tonight, no one will underestimate you again. Victor's expression was unreadable. You just made yourself a target, Elena. Dante won't forget what you said. Won't forgive it. Good. Let him remember. Let him know exactly who destroyed him. Victor studied her for a long moment. You've changed. 2 months ago, you were a girl watching her father beg for his life. Now you're standing in a ballroom full of the city's most powerful people, declaring war on a crime family. You changed me. This world changed me. Elena met his gaze. Or maybe it just revealed what I already was. And what's that? A survivor. Someone willing to do whatever it takes to never be powerless again. Victor's smile was approving, almost affectionate. Then you're going to fit in perfectly. Because tomorrow when Dante Russo retaliates, we're going to need that survival instinct. We're going to need you at your absolute strongest. What do you think he'll do? Something desperate. Something violent. Men like Dante, when they lose everything, they become dangerous in unpredictable ways. He's not thinking strategically anymore. He's thinking about revenge. As if summoning a storm by speaking its name, Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression went cold. "What is it?" Elena asked. "Fire at one of our warehouses. The one where we store the technology shipments." Victor was already moving toward the exit, Elena following. "Marcus, status report." Marcus appeared from the crowd, phone pressed to his ear. 3 warehouses hit simultaneously. Fires at 2, gunmen at the 3rd. This is coordinated. Russo's retaliation. Has to be. Response teams are en route, but an explosion in the distance cut him off. Not close, but audible. The ballroom windows rattled. People screamed. "That was the East Side facility," Marcus said, listening to his phone. "They didn't just burn it. They bombed it." Victor's jaw clenched. How many of our people were inside? Unknown, maybe a dozen. Elena felt ice in her veins. This was beyond corporate warfare now. This was people dying, burning, bleeding, because she'd stood in that ballroom and provoked Dante Russo's pride. "We need to respond," Marcus said. "If we don't hit back immediately, we look weak. We are hitting back, but not blindly, not emotionally." Victor turned to Elena. "I need to handle this. Can you get back to the building safely?" "I'm coming with you." "Elena, this is going to get messy. Real violence, not just strategic maneuvering. You don't need to see—" "I started this. I'm not hiding while people die because of it." Her voice was firm. "You said I needed to understand what it means to be part of this world. Show me." Victor searched her face, looking for fear, for hesitation. He found none. "All right. But you stay in the vehicle. No matter what happens, you stay protected. Understood?" "Understood." They ran to the parking garage, the gala forgotten behind them, the city's elite left to gossip and speculate while the real world played out in fire and blood. The drive to the East Side facility took 20 minutes through traffic that parted reluctantly, Victor's driver using every aggressive tactic short of running people off the road. Elena sat in the back beside Victor, watching him coordinate responses through rapid-fire phone calls. "Lock down the remaining properties. Double security everywhere. I want satellite surveillance on every Russo location. If they blink wrong, I want to know about it." Through the window, Elena could see smoke rising in the distance, black against the night sky. Fire trucks screamed past in the opposite direction. Police cars. Ambulances. This was real. People were hurt. Maybe dead. Because she'd wanted to prove a point, wanted to show Dante Russo she wasn't afraid. "Don't," Victor said quietly, ending his call. "Don't what?" "Don't blame yourself. This was inevitable the moment Russo decided to expand into my territory. You exposing his crimes just accelerated the timeline." Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. "In this world, Elena, violence isn't a failure of diplomacy. It's a tool, same as everything else. Russo chose to use it. Now we respond in kind." They arrived at a police perimeter 3 blocks from the warehouse. Victor's credentials got them through, the officers recognizing him and wisely deciding not to ask questions. The warehouse was a ruin, one wall completely collapsed, flames still licking at the support beams. Firefighters worked to contain the blaze while paramedics treated the wounded. Marcus met them at the command vehicle his team had set up. "Casualty report," Victor said. 4 dead, 8 injured, 3 critical. Marcus's face was granite. The bomb was planted at the loading dock. Time to go off during shift change when the most people would be present. This wasn't just retaliation. This was a message. Victor's hands clenched into fists. "Dante wants me to know he can kill my people, that he's willing to cross every line." "We have confirmation on his location," Marcus said. "He's at his uncle's estate, locked down, heavy security. They're expecting us to come after them. They're right to expect it. Victor turned to Elena. Last chance to walk away from this. What comes next? There's no going back from. Elena looked at the burning warehouse, at the body bags being loaded into ambulances, at the faces of Victor's men as they realized their co-workers, their friends, were dead. She thought about Dante Russo's smug face when he'd kidnapped her, thought about how he'd dismissed her as irrelevant, thought about him sitting in his uncle's mansion right now, probably celebrating the successful attack, probably already planning the next one. What's the plan? She asked. Victor's smile was terrible to see. We're going to do what Dante doesn't expect. We're not going to attack his property or his operation. We're going to attack his reputation with the families, make him radioactive, force his own allies to turn on him. How? Your father, Victor said. He's still alive, still in the city, still desperate for money. We're going to make him useful one last time. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. What are you going to do with him? Nothing permanent. But Thomas Carter is going to have a very public conversation about how Dante Russo approached him weeks ago, tried to recruit him to spy on my operation, offered him money to inform on his own daughter. Victor's voice was calculating. The Italian families have strict codes about honor, about family. Using a father against his daughter? That's going to make Dante look like a coward. Worse, it's going to make the old guard question whether he's fit to lead. My father will never agree to that. He will, if the alternative is having his remaining debts called in by people far less forgiving than me. Victor pulled out his phone. Marcus, pick up Thomas Carter. Bring him to the safe house. Tell him he has one chance to save himself, and it involves telling the truth about Dante Russo. Victor, Elena said carefully, my father is a liar and a coward. If you put him in front of cameras, he'll say whatever benefits him most. I know. That's why you're going to be there, looking at him, reminding him what happens if he deviates from the script even slightly. Victor's gaze was intense. Can you do that? Can you face him again? Elena thought about the last time she'd seen her father, kneeling in that rotting house, offering her as payment for his debts. She'd told him to stay out of her life forever. But this wasn't about reconciliation. This was about using him as a weapon. One final time. Yes, she said, I can do that. The safe house was a nondescript building in an industrial area, the kind of place that existed solely to be forgotten. Thomas Carter sat in a windowless room, looking even more diminished than Elena remembered. Prison would have been kinder than whatever these past 2 months had done to him. He looked up as Elena entered, and something like hope flickered across his face. Elena, sweetheart, I knew you'd come. I knew you wouldn't abandon. I'm not here to save you, she said flatly. I'm here to make sure you understand what's about to happen. Victor entered behind her, and Thomas's hope died. Mr. Carter, Victor said pleasantly, you're going to help me with something. In exchange, your remaining debts disappear, and you get to leave this city alive. Refuse, and I'll make sure every bookie, every loan shark, every desperate creditor you've ever borrowed from knows exactly where to find you. What do you want? A simple story. 3 weeks ago, Dante Russo approached you, offered you $50,000 to spy on your daughter, to report on my activities through her. You refused, of course, because despite your many flaws, you wouldn't betray your own child. But Dante was persistent, threatened you, said he'd hurt Elena if you didn't cooperate. Thomas's eyes darted between Victor and Elena. That's not true. None of that happened. It doesn't matter if it's true. It matters if people believe it. Victor leaned against the wall. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call a press conference. You're going to tell this story to every news outlet in the city. You're going to cry, express remorse for your past failures, and beg forgiveness from your daughter for almost putting her in danger. No one will believe me. They will if Elena stands beside you, if she confirms that Dante made threats, if she forgives you publicly for your momentary weakness. Victor's smile was cold. Everyone loves a redemption story, Mr. Carter. The degenerate gambler who finally found his conscience. The father who chose his daughter over money. It's practically Shakespearean. Thomas looked at Elena. You'd lie for him? After everything I did to you? I'm not lying for him. I'm using you as a weapon. Elena's voice was devoid of emotion. Dante Russo kidnapped me, threatened me, killed 4 of Victor's people tonight. If destroying him requires standing beside you for a press conference and pretending to forgive you, then that's what I'll do. But don't mistake it for reconciliation. The moment the cameras turn off, you're dead to me again. Something broke in Thomas's expression. You've become just like them, just like these criminals. No, I've become someone who survives. Something you never taught me how to do. Elena turned to Victor. When is the press conference? 9 a.m. tomorrow. That gives us tonight to prep him, make sure his story is airtight. Victor straightened. Mr. Carter, I suggest you practice looking sincere. Your daughter's safety depends on how convincing you are. They left Thomas in the room with 2 guards and a script to memorize. Outside, Elena leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. That was harder than I expected, she admitted. Using family is always hard, even when they deserve it. Victor stood beside her. You did well. Better than I expected, honestly. Most people can't compartmentalize emotion and strategy the way you just did. I had good teachers, pain, loss, desperation. Elena closed her eyes. Do you think this will work? Will the families really turn on Dante because of my father's testimony? Not immediately, but it plants doubt. Adds to the environmental scandal, the violent retaliation, the image of a man losing control. Piece by piece, we're making Dante Russo too expensive to support. His allies will start looking for alternatives. His uncle will start questioning whether his nephew is an asset or a liability. And then? Then Dante makes another mistake. Something desperate. Something that gives us the justification to end this permanently. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. Speaking of mistakes, we just intercepted communications from the Russo estate. Dante's planning something for tomorrow night, something he's calling the final solution. What does that mean? It means he's done being strategic. He's going to try to kill me, publicly, dramatically, in a way that reestablishes his dominance. Victor's voice was calm, almost amused, which is exactly what I've been waiting for. The moment Dante attacks me directly, every family in this city will have to choose a side, and I've spent the last 2 months making sure they choose mine. Elena felt the pieces clicking into place. The environmental scandal, the public humiliation, her father's upcoming testimony. None of it was just retaliation. It was all setup, all bait, drawing Dante into making the one move that would justify Victor's complete and total response. You're going to let him attack you, she said. I'm going to let him try. There's a difference. Victor's smile was predatory. Tomorrow night, there's a meeting of the family heads. Neutral ground, formal setting, the kind of gathering where everyone's supposed to be civil. Dante's going to break that treaty. He's going to try to kill me in front of everyone. And you'll be ready. I'll be unstoppable. Victor looked at her. This is the end game, Elena. Everything we've built, everything we've planned. Tomorrow night, the war ends. One way or another. Elena stood in the silence of that revelation, feeling the weight of what was coming. Violence, blood. The final collision between 2 men who refused to bend. And she would be there, watching it unfold, complicit and committed and utterly changed from the girl who'd stood in that rotting house 2 months ago. I want to be there, she said, at the meeting, when it happens. Absolutely not, it's too dangerous. You brought me to the gala. You let me face Dante there. This is no different. This is completely different. The gala was theater. Tomorrow night will be war. Then I need to see it, need to understand what this world really is when the masks come off. Elena met his gaze. You said I needed to prove I belonged here. Let me prove it. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, but you stay behind me. You follow my lead. And if I tell you to run, you run. No questions. No hesitation. Agreed? Agreed. They drove back to the building in silence, Elena watching the city lights streak past, thinking about tomorrow, about her father's press conference, about the meeting of families, about Dante Russo and his desperate plan, about the moment when everything would finally, inevitably, explode. The press conference happened exactly as Victor had orchestrated. At 9 a.m., Thomas Carter stood before a bank of cameras and microphones, his face carefully composed into an expression of remorse and fear. Elena stood 3 feet to his left, close enough to appear supportive, far enough to maintain emotional distance. The performance was flawless. 3 weeks ago, Thomas began, his voice shaking in a way that seemed genuine, a man named Dante Russo approached me in a bar. He knew about my debts, knew about my daughter working for Victor Moretti. He offered me $50,000 to spy on her, to report on Mr. Moretti's business activities. The reporters leaned forward, cameras clicking, recording devices capturing every word. I was desperate, broken. I'd already failed my daughter in every way a father can fail, but even I couldn't do that. Couldn't betray her again. Thomas's eyes glistened with tears that might have been real. I refused. Dante threatened me, said if I didn't cooperate, he'd hurt Elena, make it look like an accident. I went to Mr. Moretti, told him everything. He protected my daughter when I couldn't. Elena forced herself to look sympathetic, to nod at the right moments, to play her role in this carefully constructed lie. Every second felt like swallowing glass, but she kept her expression neutral, supportive, forgiving. I'm here today to say that Dante Russo is dangerous, that he uses intimidation and violence to get what he wants, that he has no honor, no code, nothing but ambition and brutality. Thomas turned to Elena. And I'm here to apologize to my daughter for everything, for being the kind of father who made her vulnerable to men like Russo, for failing her when she needed me most. The cameras swung to Elena. This was her moment. The pivot point where the story became credible or collapsed into obvious fiction. My father made mistakes, Elena said quietly. More than I can count. But when it mattered, when someone threatened me, he found the courage to do the right thing. That doesn't erase the past, but it's a start. She didn't say she forgave him, didn't embrace him or shed tears or offer any of the emotional catharsis the reporters clearly wanted, just gave them enough to make the story believable, to plant the seed of doubt about Dante Russo's honor. The questions came rapid fire after that. Elena deflected most of them, gave careful non-answers that implied more than they stated. By the time they left the building, the story was already spreading across every news outlet, every social media platform, every conversation in the city. Dante Russo, the man who'd bombed a warehouse and killed 4 people, had also tried to turn a father against his daughter, had threatened a woman under Victor Moretti's protection, had violated every code of honor the old families claimed to value. In the car afterward, Thomas looked at Elena with something desperate in his eyes. Did you mean it? About it being a start? No. Elena's voice was flat. I meant that you were useful one last time. Victor will honor his promise. Your debts are cleared, but you and I are done. Forever. Elena, please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you're right. You don't, and you won't get it. She turned to look at him fully. You sold me to save yourself. Everything that happened after that, every dangerous moment, every threat, every nightmare, that's on you. So take your clean slate and disappear. Because if I ever see you again, I won't be the one who decides what happens next. Victor will. And he's far less forgiving than I am. Thomas's face crumpled, but Elena felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just cold certainty that this chapter was finally, permanently closed. They dropped him at a bus station with $5,000 in cash and a ticket to a city 3 states away. Elena watched him disappear into the terminal, then turned to Marcus, who'd driven them. Make sure he actually leaves. If he's still in the city by tomorrow, Victor should know. Already planned, Marcus said. His tone toward her had shifted over the past weeks, from dismissive to wary, to something approaching respect. The press conference was good work, convincing. It was necessary. Elena settled back in her seat. Is Victor at the office? War room, preparing for tonight. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You sure you want to be there? It's going to get ugly. I'm sure. The war room was a converted conference space on the 61st floor, filled with monitors showing surveillance feeds, tactical maps, and real-time intelligence updates. Victor stood at the center, directing his team with the precision of a general coordinating a military campaign. Russo's team will arrive at the Meridian Club at 8 p.m., Sat, he was saying to a group of his most trusted operatives. They'll come in through the main entrance, heavy security, making a show of strength. Dante wants everyone to see he's not afraid, not backing down. Our people? Marcus asked, joining the briefing. Already inside, 5 servers, 3 bartenders, 2 valets, all armed, all trained, all ready. Victor pointed to a blueprint of the club. Exits here, here, and here. The moment shooting starts, we control all three. Nobody leaves until I say so. Elena studied the map, the careful planning, the layers of contingency. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was an execution masked as self-defense. What about the other families? She asked. They'll be there too. Won't they intervene? That's exactly why we're doing it this way. When Dante attacks me in front of witnesses in violation of neutral ground protocols, every family will see it. They'll understand that Russo broke the rules, that whatever happens next is justified. Victor's smile was cold. I'm not just killing Dante tonight. I'm making sure nobody questions whether he deserved it. The hours crawled toward evening. Elena spent them memorizing the tactical plan, understanding sight lines and escape routes, preparing herself mentally for what was coming. Victor had given her a small pistol, showed her how to use it, made her practice until she could load and fire without thinking. You won't need it, he'd said, but if something goes wrong, if my people fail and Dante gets close to you, don't hesitate. Aim for center mass and keep pulling the trigger until the threat stops moving. Now, as 7 p.m. approached, Elena, dressed in dark clothing that wouldn't show blood, checked the pistol one more time and tried to control her racing heartbeat. She'd witnessed crime, participated in schemes, helped destroy the Russo family's reputation, but she'd never been present for actual violence, never seen someone die. Tonight, that would change. Victor knocked on her door at 7:30. He wore a black suit with a Kevlar vest underneath, visible when he moved. His expression was calm, focused, the look of a man about to do something he'd done many times before. Last chance, he said. You can stay here. Watch on the monitors. You'll see everything without the risk. I'm going. Elena picked up her jacket. I need to see this through. They rode to the Meridian Club in an armored convoy, 3 vehicles filled with Victor's most dangerous men. The club was in the financial district, occupying the ground floor of a historic building that had been carefully preserved while the city grew around it. Inside, the family heads were already gathering, old men in expensive suits drinking older whiskey, pretending tonight was just another meeting. But everyone knew better. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Elena entered beside Victor, feeling every eye in the room track their movement. She recognized faces from the gala, from news reports, from whispered conversations about power and violence. These were the men who really ran the city, the ones who controlled everything from the shadows. Antonio Russo sat at a corner table, looking diminished, defeated. The environmental scandal had destroyed him. His political connections had evaporated. His business partners had fled. He was here tonight as a formality, a ghost of former power. But Dante stood near the bar, surrounded by 6 heavily armed men, looking anything but defeated. His eyes locked on Elena the moment she entered, filled with pure hatred. Victor guided her to a table near the back, positioned so they had clear sight lines to every exit. Marcus and 4 others took positions around them, a human shield disguised as casual proximity. The room fell silent as the head of the Calabrian family, Don Salvatore, stood to speak. He was 80 years old, a relic from an earlier era, but his voice still carried absolute authority. We gather tonight to discuss the future, he said. Recent events have created instability. The Russo family faces serious legal challenges. Victor Moretti has expanded aggressively. Both situations require conversation, careful negotiation, respect for our traditions. Traditions. Dante's voice cut through the room, sharp and bitter. You want to talk about traditions? Victor Moretti has destroyed my family using lies and manipulation. He's turned the media against us, bribed officials, orchestrated a campaign of destruction that violates every code we're supposed to honor. Your family destroyed itself, Victor replied calmly. You dumped poison into the harbor, killed 4 of my people in retaliation for being exposed. Those aren't my sins, Dante. They're yours. You leaked confidential information, used dirty tactics. I revealed the truth. There's a difference. Victor stood slowly, deliberately. You want to talk about violations? You kidnapped someone under my protection, threatened her, thought you could intimidate me through her. That's not just a violation of codes. That's a declaration of war. The room went deathly quiet. Every person present understood what was happening. This wasn't negotiation anymore. This was the final confrontation, playing out before witnesses who would carry the story forward. I should have killed her when I had the chance, Dante spat. Should have put a bullet in her head and dumped her body where you'd find it. Made you understand what real loss feels like. Elena felt Victor tense beside her, felt the room collectively hold its breath. Dante had just confessed to kidnapping in front of every major family head, had admitted to planning murder, had violated every pretense of honor or restraint. But you didn't, Elena heard herself say. Her voice was steady, cutting through the tension. Because you're a coward who hides behind threats he doesn't have the courage to follow through on. Dante's face went purple with rage. You think you're untouchable? Think Moretti's protection makes you safe? I think I've destroyed you without laying a finger on you. I think you're standing here, surrounded by people who used to respect your family, and all they see now is a desperate man who lost everything because he underestimated a woman. Elena stood, met his gaze across the room. You grabbed me off the street thinking I was weak. Instead, I became the reason your empire burned. How does that feel, Dante? The insult was calculated, designed to push him past reason. Victor had warned her this might be necessary, that Dante needed to be the aggressor, needed to make the first move in front of witnesses. It worked. Dante's hand went to his jacket. The movement was fast, practiced, the draw of someone who'd done this before. But Victor's men were faster. Gunfire erupted. Elena dove behind the table as chaos exploded around her. The sound was deafening, impossible, like the world tearing apart. Glass shattered, wood splintered, someone screamed. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and something else, something metallic and terrible. Blood. Victor was beside her, his body shielding hers, his own weapon drawn and firing with mechanical precision. Marcus and the others had formed a wall of bodies, returning fire at Dante's men with devastating efficiency. Through the chaos, Elena saw Dante diving for cover, saw Antonio Russo trying to flee, saw one of Dante's guards go down in a spray of crimson. The other family heads had scattered, hiding behind tables and bars, witnesses to the carnage, but not participants. "Stay down!" Victor shouted at her, then rose and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. One of Dante's men dropped, clutching his throat. The firefight lasted maybe 30 seconds, though it felt like hours. When the gunfire finally stopped, 6 of Dante's men were down, dead or dying. Marcus had taken a bullet to the shoulder but was still standing. 2 of Victor's other men were wounded but alive. And Dante Russo was pinned behind the bar, trapped, his weapon empty or jammed, his escape routes blocked by Victor's people. "It's over," Victor called out. "Come out, Dante. Face what you started." "You brought a woman to a meeting of families." Dante's voice was desperate, cracking. "You violated protocol. She doesn't belong here." "She belongs wherever I say she belongs. And unlike you, she didn't start shooting." Victor moved forward, his weapon trained on the bar. "You drew first, you fired first. Everyone here saw it. You violated neutral ground, broke the treaty, gave me every justification I need." Don Salvatore's voice rang out from behind an overturned table. "Victor is correct. Dante Russo initiated violence on neutral ground. Whatever happens next is his responsibility." It was a death sentence delivered in formal language. Permission granted. Witnesses assembled. Elena watched as Victor approached the bar, watched Dante emerge with his hands raised, weapon discarded, face twisted with hate and fear, and the understanding that he'd lost everything. "You destroyed my family," Dante said. "You destroyed your family. I just made sure everyone knew about it." Victor's voice was cold, final. "This is what happens when you threaten what's mine. When you cross lines that shouldn't be crossed. You wanted war, Dante. You got it, and you lost." The shot was almost anticlimactic, a single bullet, center mass, professionally placed. Dante stumbled backward, hit the bar, slid to the floor. His eyes were wide, shocked, like he'd never really believed it would end this way. Victor stood over him, watched him bleed out, then turned to face the room. "Anyone else have concerns about how I run my operations?" Silence. Absolute, total silence. "Good." Victor holstered his weapon. "Clean this up. Get our wounded to the hospital, and someone call the police. Tell them there was an attempted assassination at a business meeting. Make sure they understand who started it." The room slowly came back to life. Victor's men moved efficiently, securing the scene, tending to the wounded, removing weapons from dead hands. The other family heads began to emerge from cover, carefully not looking at Dante's body, already rewriting the story in their minds. Victor turned to Elena, who was still crouched behind the table, her hands shaking, her ears ringing from the gunfire. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head mutely. "Then stand up. Let them see you. Let them understand that you're not just my analyst or my strategist. You're under my protection, and anyone who touches you meets the same fate Dante did." Elena forced herself to stand on legs that felt like water, forced herself to look at the carnage, at the bodies, at the blood pooling on the expensive hardwood, forced herself to meet the eyes of the family heads who were watching her with new understanding. This was what power looked like in the real world. Not spreadsheets and market analysis, blood and bullets and bodies. And she had helped orchestrate it. Don Salvatore approached Victor, stepping carefully around the debris. "You've made your point, convincingly, but there will be questions. Federal investigators, media attention. The Russo family still has allies who will demand answers. Let them demand. I acted in self-defense in front of 24 witnesses. Dante drew first, fired first, violated every protocol." Victor's voice was calm, reasonable. "Any investigation will confirm exactly what we all saw. A desperate man who started a fight he couldn't finish." "And the woman?" Don Salvatore's gaze shifted to Elena. "Bringing her here was provocative. Bringing her here was necessary. She's part of my operations, an essential part, and she needed to see what this world really is." Victor's hand found Elena's back, steadying her. "Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." The old Don studied them both for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "The Russo territories will need new management. Their port operations, their shipping contracts. Someone will have to step in." "I'm sure we can come to an arrangement," Victor said, "one that benefits everyone." It was happening in real time. Dante's body wasn't even cold yet, and already the vultures were circling, dividing up the spoils. Elena felt sick and fascinated in equal measure. The police arrived 20 minutes later along with ambulances and crime scene investigators. Victor's story was simple, consistent, backed by multiple witnesses. Dante Russo had initiated violence at a business meeting. Victor had defended himself and others. Tragic, but justified. The detectives took statements, photographed the scene, removed the bodies. By midnight, they were done, their investigation already leaning toward the conclusion Victor had crafted for them. Elena sat in Victor's office afterward, a glass of whiskey she hadn't touched on the table in front of her. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but the images kept replaying in her mind. The gunfire. The blood. Dante's shocked expression as he realized he was dying. "You killed him," she said quietly. "Yes. In front of everyone. That was the point. To make sure everyone understood what happens when someone threatens my operation, threatens you." Victor poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know. Numb? Horrified? Relieved?" Elena finally looked at him. "I helped cause this. My actions, my words to Dante at the gala, they pushed him to this." "No. Dante's arrogance and desperation pushed him to this. You were just the catalyst. If it hadn't been you, it would have been something else." Victor sat across from her. "This was inevitable from the moment he decided to expand into my territory. Tonight just ended it faster than it might have otherwise. 4 of your people died in that warehouse. 6 of Dante's men died tonight. That's 10 people dead because of a business dispute. That's 10 people dead because Dante Russo refused to accept that there are consequences for crossing certain lines." Victor's voice hardened. "Don't mistake what happened tonight for senseless violence, Elena. It was necessary, surgical. It ended a threat and established clear boundaries for everyone else watching. Sometimes violence is the only language that works." Elena understood the logic, accepted it even. But accepting it intellectually and processing it emotionally were different things. "I thought I was ready for this," she said. "Thought I understood what this world was. But seeing it, being there when it happened, that's different than imagining it." "Yes, it is." Victor's expression softened slightly. "The first time is always the hardest. The first time you see someone die because of decisions you helped make. But it gets easier. Not because you stop caring, but because you understand that it's necessary. That the alternative is being the one on the floor instead of the one standing. Is that what you tell yourself? That it's them or you? It's not what I tell myself. It's reality. This world has simple rules, Elena. You protect what's yours. You punish threats decisively. You never show weakness. Follow those rules and you survive. Break them and you end up like Dante Russo. Elena stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city that seemed so peaceful from this height. Somewhere down there, families were grieving. Police were filing reports. News outlets were crafting headlines. And she was standing in a penthouse office, complicit in murder, trying to reconcile who she'd been with, who she was becoming. "I'm not sorry he's dead," she said finally. "That's what scares me. I should feel guilty, horrified. But all I feel is relief that the threat is gone, that he can't hurt me or you or anyone else. Does that make me a monster? It makes you a survivor. Someone who understands that morality is a luxury and survival is a necessity." Victor joined her at the window. "You've changed, Elena. In 3 months, you've gone from a desperate girl watching her father beg for his life to a woman who can stand in a room where 10 men died and feel relief instead of horror. That's not weakness. That's evolution." "Is that what you did? Evolved?" "I adapted, learned, became what I needed to become to survive and thrive in this world." Victor's reflection in the glass was unreadable. "You're doing the same. The question is whether you can live with who you're becoming." Elena thought about her father's pathetic attempt at reconciliation, thought about Dante's hatred as he died, thought about the empire she'd helped protect and expand built on violence and crime and ruthless pragmatism. "I can live with it," she said, "because the alternative is going back to powerlessness, and I'll never be powerless again." Victor smiled. "Then you're exactly where you need to be." The next morning brought a media firestorm. The shooting at the Meridian Club was front-page news, with witnesses confirming that Dante Russo had initiated the violence. The environmental scandal that had destroyed Antonio Russo's reputation now extended to his nephew's reckless behavior. The narrative Victor had crafted held perfectly. Dante Russo was portrayed as a violent criminal who'd attacked a legitimate businessman during a professional meeting. Victor Moretti was the victim who'd defended himself and others. The other families backed this story unanimously, protecting their own interests by distancing themselves from the Russo name. Within 48 hours, the Russo empire was being dismantled. Their port operations were sold off to various buyers, all of whom kicked a percentage to Victor for facilitating the transfers. Their warehouses were seized by federal investigators looking into the environmental violations. Their political connections evaporated like morning dew. Antonio Russo himself disappeared, reportedly fleeing to Italy with whatever money he'd managed to hide from investigators. The family that had controlled the waterfront for 3 generations was gone, erased, a cautionary tale about ambition and overreach. And Elena Carter stood at the center of it all, no longer the analyst working in the background, but a visible, acknowledged part of Victor's inner circle, the woman who'd helped orchestrate the Russo family's destruction, the one who'd stood beside Victor at the Meridian Club and walked out alive while Dante bled out on the floor. She should have felt triumph, victory, the satisfaction of having won. Instead, she felt hollow. The knock on her apartment door came at 3 a.m., 3 days after the shooting. Elena answered it to find Victor standing there, still dressed despite the late hour. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "No." "Come with me. I want to show you something." They took the elevator to the roof, a space Elena hadn't even known existed. It was converted into a private terrace, complete with a garden, sitting areas, and a view of the entire city. "I come up here when the weight gets too heavy," Victor said, settling into a chair. "When I need to remind myself why I do this." "And why do you do this?" Elena asked, sitting beside him. "Because the alternative is submission. Accepting that the world is run by people who inherited power or bought it with legitimate money they stole through legal means. I refuse to accept that. So I built my own power structure, my own empire." Victor gestured at the city. "Every light down there represents someone who thinks they're in control of their life. But they're not. They're controlled by systems they don't understand, rules they didn't agree to, power structures they can't see. I see them, and I refuse to be controlled by them. That's not freedom. That's just a different kind of prison. Perhaps. But it's a prison I chose, one where I make the rules instead of following someone else's. Victor looked at her. You're struggling with what happened, with what you've become. That's normal. But you need to decide whether you can accept it or whether you need to walk away. You'd let me leave? I'd let you try. But we both know you're too deep now, too connected, too complicit. Even if you walked away from me, the world would still see you as Elena Carter, the woman who helped destroy the Russo family. That's not a reputation you can escape. He was right. She knew it. The moment she'd stood beside her father at that press conference, the moment she'd walked into the Meridian Club, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I don't want to leave, Elena said quietly. I just want to understand how to live with what I've done, what I've become, by accepting that morality is contextual, that right and wrong are decided by whoever has the power to enforce their definition, that survival matters more than philosophy. Victor's voice was gentle, almost kind. You're not evil, Elena. You're practical. You're someone who recognized that the legitimate world failed you and chose an alternative path. There's no shame in that. Dante would disagree. Dante's dead. His opinion is irrelevant. Victor stood, offered her his hand. Come on, I want to give you something. They went back to his office, where he pulled out a folder from his desk and handed it to her. Inside were legal documents, contracts, ownership papers. What is this? Elena asked. Your stake. 20% ownership in 3 of my most profitable legitimate businesses. Real estate holdings worth approximately $15 million. Investment accounts in your name. Victor's smile was genuine. You've earned more than a salary, Elena. You've earned a real share of what we've built. This makes you a partner, not just an employee. Elena stared at the documents, feeling the weight of them. This wasn't just money. This was power. Real, tangible power. The kind that came with resources and options and the ability to shape her own future. Why? She whispered. Because you've proven yourself. Because you're valuable. Because I want you invested in this empire's success, not just working for it. Victor's expression was serious. And because I've come to care about you, Elena, not as collateral, not as an asset, as a person who matters to me. The admission hung between them, unexpected and honest. Elena looked up at him, saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Vulnerability. The mask of the untouchable crime lord slipped just enough to reveal the man underneath. I care about you too, she said. More than I expected to. More than I should, probably. Probably, Victor agreed. But here we are anyway. He pulled her close, and Elena let herself lean into him, let herself acknowledge the connection that had been building between them for months. It wasn't love, not exactly. It was something more complicated. Trust built in blood. Respect earned through violence. Partnership forged in the fires of shared danger. What happens now? She asked against his chest. Now we rebuild. Expand. Take the territory the Russos left behind and make it ours. Build something stronger than what came before. Victor's voice was certain. And you stop being my analyst and become my partner, my equal. Someone who shapes this empire instead of just serving it. Elena pulled back to look at him. You're equal? In everything that matters. You've proven you can think strategically, act decisively, survive when survival seemed impossible. You're not the frightened girl your father tried to sell anymore. You're Elena Carter, the woman who brought down the Russo family. That's worth more than any title I could give you. He was right. She wasn't that girl anymore. That girl had died somewhere between the gala and the warehouse fire and the Meridian Club. What remained was someone harder, colder, more dangerous. Someone who could live in this world and thrive. Then let's build something worth the cost, Elena said. Something that makes all of this mean something. Victor smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. Deal. They stood there as dawn broke over the city, 2 people bound by blood and violence and shared ambition, looking out at an empire they would rule together. The price had been high, the cost measured in lives and morality and pieces of their humanity they'd never get back. But they had survived, had won, had claimed power in a world that tried to keep them powerless. And that, Elena thought, was worth every terrible thing they'd done to get here. The 6 months following Dante Russo's death transformed the city's power structure in ways that would have seemed impossible when Elena first walked into Victor's penthouse. The Russo territories didn't just change hands, they were systematically absorbed, restructured, and rebuilt into something more efficient, more profitable, and infinitely more controlled. Elena stood at the center of it all, no longer observing from the shadows but commanding in the light. The morning of the territorial consolidation meeting, she dressed with the same precision she'd learned to apply to everything in this new life. A charcoal suit tailored to perfection, hair pulled back in a severe style that emphasized the sharp angles of her face, minimal jewelry except for a platinum watch that cost more than her childhood home. She looked like power incarnate, and that was exactly the point. Marcus met her in the hallway outside Victor's office, his shoulder fully healed from the bullet he'd taken at the Meridian Club. His expression had shifted from grudging respect to something approaching genuine partnership over the past months. "They're all here," he said. "The Port Authority representatives, the shipping company executives, 3 family heads who want to negotiate access to the new infrastructure. Victor's already working them, but he wants you to handle the financial negotiations." "And the resistance?" 2 holdouts, old guard types who think a woman shouldn't be at the table, let alone running the numbers. Marcus's smile was grim. "Should be entertaining watching you change their minds." The conference room was filled with men who'd spent decades building empires of their own, men who'd seen Victor Moretti rise from nothing and had learned to respect his power if not necessarily like it. But as Elena entered behind Victor, she saw their expressions shift, calculation replacing assumption as they reassessed what her presence meant. "Gentlemen," Victor said, taking his seat at the head of the table, "thank you for coming. I believe you all know Elena Carter, my partner and head of strategic operations." Partner. Not assistant, not analyst. Partner. The word landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through the room. One of the older men, a Port Authority director named Robert Chen, cleared his throat. "Mr. Moretti, with all due respect, these negotiations involve complex maritime law and international trade regulations. Perhaps Ms. Carter would be more comfortable." "Ms. Carter holds a degree in international business and economics, has spent the last 6 months restructuring 3 major shipping operations, and understands maritime law better than most of your legal team," Victor interrupted smoothly. "She'll be leading today's discussions. I'm just here to make sure everyone plays nice." Elena took her seat, opened her laptop, and pulled up the presentation she'd spent 2 weeks perfecting. "Let's start with the current state of port operations. As you all know, the Russo family's environmental violations resulted in the suspension of 17 shipping contracts and the seizure of 4 major warehouses. This has created a vacuum in cargo handling capacity that's currently costing the city approximately $2 million per day in delayed shipments and rerouted traffic." She clicked to the next slide, showing a detailed breakdown of costs and inefficiencies. "What I'm proposing is a restructured consortium. Victor's organization will acquire the seized Russo properties at fair market value, invest $20 million in environmental remediation and upgraded facilities, and create a new management structure that brings all major shipping operations under a single, coordinated system." "That's essentially a monopoly," Chen protested. "It's vertical integration," Elena corrected, "and it's legal, provided we maintain transparent pricing and allow competitive access to all qualified carriers, which we will. Because a monopoly draws federal attention, and none of us want that." She spent the next hour walking them through the financial models, the legal structures, the revenue projections. Every question was anticipated, every objection addressed before it could fully form. She'd learned from Victor that power in these rooms came from knowing more than everyone else and making sure they knew you knew it. By the time she finished, even Chen was nodding slowly, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging acknowledgement that the numbers worked, that the structure was sound, that this young woman who'd appeared from nowhere had built something impressive. "The consortium contracts are ready for signature," Elena concluded. "Each of you will receive the agreed-upon access rights, pricing guarantees, and profit participation. In exchange, you'll support the environmental remediation efforts and publicly back the new management structure." Questions? Silence. Then one of the family heads, a younger man named Vincent Delgado, who'd taken over his father's operations 2 years prior, spoke up. "I have one question, Ms. Carter. Not about the business structure, but about you. His voice wasn't hostile, just curious. 6 months ago, you were unknown. Now you're restructuring the city's entire shipping infrastructure. How does someone make that leap? Elena met his gaze steadily. By being willing to do what others won't. By seeing opportunities where others see obstacles. And by understanding that power isn't given, it's taken by those brave enough to reach for it. Delgado smiled. Fair enough. I'm in. One by one, the others agreed. Contracts were signed, hands were shaken, and by the time the meeting ended, Elena had successfully orchestrated the largest consolidation of shipping operations in the city's history. As the room emptied, Victor hung back, waiting until they were alone. You've become very good at this, he said. I had a good teacher. I taught you strategy, the rest. The confidence, the presence, the ability to make men twice your age defer to your expertise, that's all you. Victor moved closer. You've exceeded every expectation I had when I first met you. You mean when my father tried to sell me to pay his debts? Even then I saw potential. But potential and actualization are different things. You've become actualized, Elena, fully realized in a way most people never achieve. She thought about the girl she'd been 7 months ago, standing in that rotting house, watching her father kneel and beg. That girl had been powerless, trapped, defined entirely by other people's failures. The woman she'd become had agency, influence, the ability to reshape reality through force of will and strategic brilliance. There's still resistance, Elena said. Not everyone is comfortable with how quickly things have changed, how much power we've consolidated. Let them be uncomfortable. Discomfort keeps people cautious, respectful. Victor walked to the window, the city spread beneath them like a game board. But you're right that we need to be careful. Success attracts attention, and too much attention attracts federal investigations. We need to start legitimizing the operation, making it cleaner, more defensible. I've been working on that. Elena pulled up another file on her laptop. I've identified 12 businesses we can divest, operations that are profitable but high risk from a legal perspective. If we sell them now, while the market's strong, we can reinvest the proceeds in legitimate ventures. Real estate development, technology investments, venture capital funds. Within 2 years, we could have 70% of our revenue coming from completely legal sources. Victor studied the proposal, his expression thoughtful. You're talking about fundamentally changing what we are. I'm talking about evolution. The old model, the one the Russos followed, the one your predecessors built, that's dying. Federal law enforcement is too sophisticated, surveillance too comprehensive, the risks too high. But if we transition now from a position of strength, we can build something sustainable, something that lasts beyond immediate profit, something legitimate, something powerful. Legitimacy is just a tool like everything else, but it's a useful tool. It opens doors that crime keeps closed. Elena closed the laptop. You taught me that power is about controlling what people need. Legal power is just as effective as illegal power, and it comes with far fewer bodies. The reference to bodies, to Dante Russo bleeding out on the Meridian Club floor, to the warehouse workers who died in the explosion, to the cost of their empire, hung between them. You've thought about this carefully, Victor said. I've thought about little else. We won, Victor. We destroyed the Russos, consolidated their territory, expanded our influence. But winning once isn't the same as building something permanent. If we want to actually rule this city, not just survive in it, we need to think long-term. Victor was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then he smiled. All right, show me the full proposal. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. Complete transformation, not half measures. Over the next 3 months, they executed Elena's vision with the same ruthless efficiency they'd applied to destroying the Russo family. High-risk operations were quietly sold off or shut down. Money was laundered one final time and then invested in legitimate ventures. Real estate portfolios were expanded. Technology startups were funded. A venture capital firm was established with Elena as a principal partner. The transformation wasn't without casualties. Some of Victor's longtime associates resisted the changes, uncomfortable with going legitimate, unwilling to give up the more violent aspects of the business. Those who couldn't adapt were paid off and pushed out. Those who actively resisted found themselves facing the same systematic destruction that had ended the Russos. Elena discovered she had a talent for this kind of corporate warfare. The skills she'd developed analyzing weaknesses in art fraud schemes translated perfectly to identifying vulnerabilities in business competitors. She could dismantle a rival company with the same precision she'd once used to expose forgeries, using market manipulation instead of violence, hostile takeovers instead of bullets. It was cleaner, more sustainable, and in its own way, just as ruthless. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier in an envelope embossed with the seal of the mayor's office. Elena opened it in Victor's office, both of them reading the formal script together. The mayor of the city requests the pleasure of your company at the annual Civic Leadership Gala, honoring those who have contributed to the city's economic development and cultural enrichment. They're inviting us to the establishment's main event, Victor said, something like amusement in his voice. 6 months ago, they were investigating us. Now we're honored guests. That's what legitimacy buys. Access. Elena set down the invitation. We should go. Network with the politicians and business leaders. Show them we're part of the system now, not threatening it from outside. You've changed your position on being part of the system. I've learned that you can change the system more effectively from inside it. Revolution from within, as it were. Elena smiled. Besides, half the people at that gala built their fortunes the same way we built ours. They just had more time to clean up the origins. The gala was everything Elena expected. Excessive wealth masquerading as civic duty, political ambition dressed up as public service, power brokers making deals while pretending to discuss charity. She wore a deep emerald gown that had cost more than her college tuition, her hair styled in elegant waves, looking every inch the successful businesswoman rather than the criminal strategist. Victor moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, making small talk, playing the role of reformed entrepreneur who'd put his questionable past behind him. And people believed it, or at least pretended to, because his money was as good as anyone else's, and his influence was increasingly necessary to get things done in the city. Elena found herself in conversation with the deputy mayor, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Morrison, who'd built her career on understanding where real power lived. Ms. Carter, Morrison said, I've been following your work with the Port Consortium. Impressive turnaround on what could have been an environmental and economic disaster. Thank you. It was a team effort, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I'm sure. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about your background. You seem to appear fully formed in Victor Moretti's organization. Not many people make that kind of entrance. It was a probe, carefully phrased, asking where Elena had come from and how she'd risen so quickly. The subtext was clear. Are you legitimate, or are you just better at hiding your origins? I grew up in this city, Elena said calmly. Worked my way through college, learned business from the ground up. Mr. Moretti recognized potential and gave me opportunities to prove myself. I took advantage of them. Clearly. And now you're a principal partner in one of the city's fastest-growing venture capital firms. That's quite a trajectory. America's full of stories like mine, people who start with nothing and build something meaningful. I just happened to find the right mentor. Elena sipped her champagne. Though I notice you're not asking about Mr. Moretti's background, only mine. Morrison's smile sharpened. Mr. Moretti's background is well documented. Yours is more mysterious. That tends to make people like me curious. People like you being politicians who need to understand everyone's leverage points? People like me being public servants who want to know who's shaping our city's future? Morrison's voice lost its edge slightly, became more genuine. Look, Ms. Carter, I'm not trying to dig up dirt. I'm trying to understand if you're someone I can work with. Someone who understands that power comes with responsibility. Elena met her gaze. I understand that power without responsibility is tyranny, and responsibility without power is servitude. I'm interested in neither. I want to build things that last, that matter, that improve this city while also benefiting those who invest in it. If that aligns with your goals, then yes, we can work together. Morrison nodded slowly. I think we can. The city needs people who understand how things really work, who can navigate between the official structures and the unofficial ones. You seem to have that ability. I learned from necessity, and I'm still learning. Elena glanced across the room to where Victor was deep in conversation with a state senator. But I'm committed to being part of this city's future, not just profiting from it. Good. Because there are infrastructure projects coming down the pipeline that will need private investment and political support. People like you and Mr. Moretti could be very helpful in making them happen, and very profitable doing so. It was an invitation into the real machinery of power, the place where government contracts met private interests, where policy was shaped by people who understood that idealism was a luxury and pragmatism was a necessity. Elena had arrived. Later that night, back in Victor's penthouse, they stood at the windows overlooking the city, both of them still dressed in their formal wear, processing what the evening had meant. Morrison offered us a seat at the table, Elena said. Real political influence, not just economic power. I heard her talking to you. She's smart, recognizing that we're transitioning from necessary evil to necessary partner. Victor loosened his tie. The question is whether we want that kind of integration. Once you're entangled with the political machine, it's hard to maintain independence. We're already entangled. We've just been on the outside looking in. This way, we shape policy instead of just reacting to it. Elena turned to face him. Besides, independence is overrated. What matters is influence. The ability to protect what we've built and expand it in directions we choose. You sound like you're planning to run for office yourself someday. Maybe I will. Would that be so strange? We've already proven that legitimacy is just a matter of time in public relations. Why not take it all the way? Victor laughed, genuine and surprised. Elena Carter, crime boss turned politician. I'd pay to see that campaign. You wouldn't have to pay. You'd be my largest donor. Elena smiled, but her expression turned more serious. I'm not joking, Victor. Not entirely. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I want to be someone who shapes this city's future. Not just someone who profits from it. That means real power, the kind that comes from political office and public legitimacy. And what about us? What about this? Victor gestured between them, indicating the partnership that had evolved into something deeper, more complex than either of them had initially intended. It was the question that had been hovering between them for months, unspoken but increasingly urgent. Their relationship had transcended the original arrangement. She was no longer collateral. He was no longer just her employer. They'd become genuine partners, equals in ambition and capability, if not yet in raw power. But there was more. The late nights working together, the shared danger that had forged unbreakable trust, the moments of vulnerability that had revealed the people beneath the masks. Somewhere along the way, professional partnership had deepened into something that looked remarkably like love, even if neither of them was quite ready to name it. What about us? Elena echoed. Victor moved closer, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. I didn't bring you into this world to fall in love with you. I brought you in because you were useful, because your father's debt created an opportunity. But you became more than useful, Elena. You became essential, irreplaceable. And somewhere in that process, you became the only person I trust completely. Trust born from shared crimes, Elena said softly, from blood and violence and mutual survival. Is that worse than trust born from comfort and safety? We've seen each other at our absolute worst and our absolute best. We've built an empire together from nothing. That's more real than anything most people ever experience. He was right. Their bond was forged in fire, tested by adversity, proven through survival. It was darker than conventional relationships, built on a foundation most people would consider monstrous. But it was also unbreakably strong precisely because of what they'd endured together. I'm going to ask you something, Victor said, his voice steady, but his eyes showing a hint of uncertainty. And I want you to be honest, even if the answer isn't what I hope for. All right, if I offered you freedom, real freedom, not the illusion of it, would you take it? If I dissolved our partnership, gave you enough money to start over anywhere, released you from any obligation or connection to me or this life, would you leave? Elena felt her heart constrict. It was a test, she realized. Not a cruel one, but a necessary one. Victor needed to know if she was here by choice or because she felt trapped by circumstances and complicity. She thought about what leaving would mean: escape from the danger, from the moral compromises, from the weight of shared violence. A chance to be someone completely different, to start fresh in a place where nobody knew about Dante Russo or the Meridian Club or the empire built on blood and strategy. But she also thought about what she'd built here, the power she wielded, the influence she commanded, the future she was shaping, the partnership with Victor that had become the most meaningful relationship in her life. The person she'd become, stronger, sharper, infinitely more capable than the girl who'd stood in that rotting house. "No," she said finally, "I wouldn't leave." "Because you feel obligated?" "Because I don't want to. Because everything I've become, everything I've built, is here. Because walking away would mean abandoning the only thing that's ever made me feel truly alive." Elena stepped closer to him. "And because I choose you, Victor. Not because I'm trapped, not because I'm afraid, but because I genuinely choose this partnership and everything that comes with it." The relief in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. Even knowing what it costs, what it will continue to cost, especially knowing that. I'm not naive anymore. I understand exactly what this life is, what we are, and I'm choosing it anyway. Victor pulled her close, and Elena let herself sink into the embrace, feeling the solid reality of him, the warmth and certainty and shared understanding. "Then I want to make this official," Victor said. "Not as employer and employee, not as mentor and student, as true partners. Equal shares in everything we've built, equal voice in every decision, king and queen of this empire we've created." That's a significant power shift. It's recognition of reality. You've earned it 100 times over, and more than that, I want it. Want you beside me, not as a subordinate, but as an equal. Victor pulled back to look at her. "There's a contract on my desk. I had my lawyers draw it up last week. 50% ownership in everything, the businesses, the properties, the investments. Sign it, and we're genuine partners in every sense that matters." Elena felt something shift in her chest, a rush of emotion that was equal parts triumph and terror. True partnership meant true responsibility, true exposure to the risks and rewards, but it also meant validation, acknowledgement that she'd transcended her origins completely. "Show me the contract." They walked to his desk, and Victor pulled out a thick legal document. Elena read through it carefully, her business training kicking in even as her emotions churned. The terms were exactly as he'd described: complete equality, shared ownership, mutual decision-making authority. At the bottom was a space for her signature. "Once you sign this, there's no hierarchy between us," Victor said. "No boss and subordinate, no senior and junior partner. Just two people who built something extraordinary together and decided to share it equally." Elena picked up the pen, felt its weight in her hand. This was the final step, the completion of a transformation that had begun the day her father had offered her as payment for his debts. From collateral to asset to partner to equal. From powerless to powerful. From victim to architect of her own destiny. She signed her name in bold, decisive strokes. Victor signed below her, then pulled out another document. "And this," he said, "is something else entirely." Elena looked at the single page. It was brief, almost informal compared to the dense legal language of the partnership agreement. "A personal contract," Victor explained. "Not about business or money or power. About us. You and me, the people beneath the empire builders. I'm promising that I will never lie to you, never betray you, never put my interests above ours. And I'm asking you to promise the same." It was shockingly vulnerable. This man who commanded an empire with ruthless efficiency, offering her a contract that was essentially a declaration of trust and commitment. Not quite marriage, not quite a business arrangement, but something uniquely theirs. Elena read it again, felt tears prick at her eyes for the first time in months. This is terrifying. Love usually is, especially for people like us who've learned that trust is dangerous and vulnerability is weakness. Victor's voice was soft. "But I'm willing to be terrified with you if you're willing to be terrified with me." Elena signed the personal contract without hesitation, then watched Victor sign below her name. He pulled her into a kiss that was different from the ones before, deeper and more complete, a ceiling of promises that went beyond words or contracts. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling, genuine joy breaking through the careful control they usually maintained. "So what now?" Elena asked. "We run an empire together, build a legitimate dynasty, take over the city?" "All of that. And we do it as partners, as equals, as two people who started with nothing and refused to accept the world's limitations." Victor pulled her close again. You've come so far, Elena. From the girl whose father tried to sell her to the woman who rules beside me. Are you proud of who you've become? Elena thought about the question seriously, thought about the violence she'd witnessed, the crimes she'd helped orchestrate, the moral lines she'd crossed, thought about the power she now wielded, the future she was shaping, the empire she co-ruled. I'm proud of surviving, she said finally. Proud of refusing to break when breaking would have been easier. Proud of becoming powerful instead of staying powerless. She looked up at him. I'm not proud of everything we've done, but I'm proud of who we've become despite it. Or maybe because of it. That's all any of us can be. Survivors who made difficult choices and lived with the consequences. Victor's expression was peaceful, settled in a way she'd never seen before. I brought you into this world thinking you'd be useful. You became so much more than that. You became the person who makes this all worthwhile. They stood there in the penthouse office, the city lights spreading below them like conquered territory. Two people who'd started as predator and prey and had become something infinitely more complex. Partners. Equals. The architects of an empire built on ruthlessness and intelligence and the refusal to accept powerlessness. Elena Carter had been sold by her father to pay his debts. 7 months later, she ruled beside the man who'd bought her, not as property, but as an equal partner in one of the city's most powerful organizations. The journey had cost her innocence, had required sacrifices most people couldn't imagine, had transformed her into someone her younger self wouldn't recognize. But she had survived. More than survived, she had conquered. The price of survival had been steep. But standing here now, with Victor beside her, and an empire at her feet and a future she would shape rather than endure, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she would pay that price again. Because powerlessness was the only thing she truly feared, and she would never be powerless again. In the weeks that followed, the new partnership structure became public knowledge. Elena Carter wasn't just Victor Moretti's associate anymore. She was his equal, with her name on all the major deals, her signature on all the contracts, her voice carrying the same weight as his in every negotiation. The city's power brokers adjusted quickly. Those who'd been skeptical of her rapid rise now saw the partnership for what it was: permanent, powerful, and completely legitimate in the new order they were building. Morrison's infrastructure projects moved forward with private investment from their venture capital firm. Real estate developments transformed abandoned industrial areas into profitable mixed-use complexes. Technology investments paid off as 3 of their portfolio companies went public, generating returns that made even the most skeptical investors take notice. The empire wasn't just surviving the transition from criminal enterprise to legitimate business. It was thriving, growing, becoming the kind of power structure that would last for generations. And at the center of it all stood Elena and Victor, partners in every sense that mattered, building something that transcended their individual ambitions. One evening, 6 months after signing the partnership agreement, Elena stood in the same penthouse where she'd first met Victor, looking out at a city that felt fundamentally different than it had when she'd arrived desperate and powerless. Victor joined her at the window, handing her a glass of wine. "Thinking about the past?" he asked. "Thinking about how far we've come, how different everything is." Elena took a sip. "My father tried to sell me to save himself. Now I'm one of the most powerful people in this city. The symmetry is almost poetic. Your father was a coward who saw you as a commodity. I saw you as potential waiting to be realized." Victor's voice was thoughtful. "Do you ever think about him? Wonder what happened to him?" "Sometimes. I heard he's in Nevada, working construction, staying sober. Part of me hopes he's found some kind of peace, but mostly I don't think about him at all. He's a chapter I've closed." "Good. The past should inform us, not define us." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, thinking about everything they'd built and everything still to come. "I love you," Elena said suddenly, the words emerging naturally, without the fear or hesitation she'd expected. "I don't think I've said that out loud before." Victor turned to her, his expression soft with an emotion she'd rarely seen him display. "I love you too. Have for months, if I'm being honest. I just wasn't sure you wanted to hear it. I needed time to understand what it meant, to separate genuine feeling from Stockholm Syndrome or trauma bonding or any of the other ways captivity can twist into something that looks like love. And now, Now I know the difference. What I feel for you is real, complicated, dark, built on a foundation most people would find terrifying, but real. Elena set down her wine glass. We're not a normal couple, Victor. We never will be. Our love story started with violence and will probably end with it, but it's ours, and I wouldn't change it even if I could. Neither would I. Victor pulled her close, and they stood together as the city sparkled below them, two people who'd found something genuine in the darkest of circumstances. The contract they'd signed months ago, the personal one, the promise of trust and loyalty and partnership, had evolved into something deeper. They were building a life together, strange and unconventional as it was, based on mutual respect and shared ambition and love that had survived every test. What's next for us? Elena asked. We've consolidated power, legitimized the empire, built something sustainable. What's the next challenge? Victor smiled. Whatever we want it to be. That's the beauty of having this much power, Elena. We don't react to circumstances anymore. We create them. We decide what the future looks like and then make it happen. Then I want to create something meaningful, not just profitable, but actually important. Something that improves this city while also securing our legacy. What did you have in mind? Elena's mind was already racing, connecting possibilities, seeing opportunities where others would see obstacles. Education initiatives in underserved neighborhoods, job training programs, investment in infrastructure that creates real opportunities instead of just profit. We have the resources and the influence to actually change lives. Why not use them? Because altruism and power don't usually coexist? They can if the altruism serves the power. Better educated populations are more productive, create more wealth, generate more stability. We'd be investing in the city's future while also ensuring that future is profitable for us. Elena's voice grew more animated, and it creates genuine legitimacy. Not the fake kind where we just buy politicians, but real respect from people who see us as builders rather than criminals. Victor listened, his expression thoughtful. You want to be remembered as more than just successful. You want to be remembered as important, as someone who mattered beyond just accumulating wealth and power. Don't you? Isn't that better than just being another crime boss who got rich and died? Much better. Victor's smile was genuine. All right, let's build your legacy project, something that carries our names into the future as benefactors rather than just business people. I'll have the team start researching education infrastructure needs and development opportunities. They spent the next hour planning, their minds working in perfect synchronization, building something new on the foundation of everything they'd already accomplished. It felt right, this evolution from pure self-interest to something more complex, more nuanced, more meaningful. As midnight approached, Elena found herself thinking about the girl she'd been 7 months ago, powerless, trapped, watching her father sell her to save himself. That girl would never have imagined this future, standing in a penthouse as an equal partner to one of the city's most powerful men, planning initiatives that would shape thousands of lives, secure in the knowledge that she commanded real, tangible influence. Do you ever regret it? Victor asked, seeming to read her thoughts. The choices you made? The person you became? Elena considered the question seriously. I regret the necessity of it. I regret that the world is structured in a way that made this path the most viable option. But I don't regret surviving. I don't regret becoming powerful instead of remaining a victim. Even knowing what it cost? Especially knowing what it cost. Because the alternative was worse. The alternative was powerlessness, poverty, watching my life be determined by other people's decisions. This way, I determine my own future. That's worth almost any price. Victor nodded slowly. You've become exactly what I saw the potential for that first day. Strong, brilliant, absolutely unwilling to accept limitations. I'm proud of you, Elena. Proud of us. So am I. They stood together as the night deepened, two people who'd found power through partnership, who'd built an empire on intelligence and ruthlessness and the refusal to be broken by circumstances. Their love was dark, complicated, built on a foundation of shared violence and mutual survival. But it was also real, tested by adversity, strengthened by trust. The city below them continued its endless cycle, millions of people living their lives, most of them completely unaware of the forces that shaped their reality. But Elena knew. She'd learned the hard way that the world was controlled by people willing to reach for power, willing to pay the price for influence, willing to become something more than what circumstances had made them. She'd reached for power and seized it, had paid the price and survived, had become something extraordinary through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. From collateral to queen, from powerless to powerful, from victim to architect. The transformation was complete, and the future stretched ahead, limitless and full of possibility, waiting to be shaped by the woman who'd refused to break, the man who'd recognized her potential, and the empire they'd built together from blood and ambition and the absolute certainty that power belonged to those brave enough to claim it. Elena Carter had been sold to save a coward's life. 7 months later, she ruled beside a king, no longer defined by what had been done to her but by what she'd chosen to become. The price of survival had been steep, the cost of power even steeper. But standing here now, with everything she'd ever wanted within her grasp, and the only man she'd ever loved beside her, Elena knew with perfect clarity that she would pay that price again and again. Because this power, this partnership, this hard-won empire, was worth every terrible, necessary thing they'd done to build it. And she would defend it, expand it, and shape it into something that would last long after they were gone. That was the promise she made to herself, to Victor, and to the city that had tried to break her and had instead forged her into something unbreakable. The girl who'd stood in that rotting house was dead. Long live the queen who'd risen from her ashes.